In today's episode, we're taught how to use a blender properly. Howdy, I'm Jeff Goldsmith, and this is the Q&A. My agenda is simple. Each week, I plan to bring you in-depth insights into the creative process of storytelling. And folks, we're very excited to have with us actor Jason Isaacs to discuss his role on White Lotus Season 3, which is Emmy eligible. And as you will hear, Jason and I have known each other for a long time. He's been in the podcast before, and that's why he was just in the mood to have a good long chat about his career and, of course, his role on White Lotus Season 3. And one of the things I really love about Jason that you're going to hear is the notes that he gives producers, filmmakers, etc. They're fantastic. They're non-invasive. They're collaborative. And I think it just goes hand in hand with Jason's love for storytelling, that he's able to interpret his characters in such a way, he's able to enhance them a bit in ways that filmmakers really appreciate. And it's a really complex role because while so many other things are going externally for the other characters, Jason's character is internalizing most of what's going on with him. In fact, I would argue that most of the other characters are not aware of just how bad things are going, although they know something's off. They ask him multiple times. But there's a big hat trick to being able to really internalize your emotions, but also externalize it for a performance. And without a doubt, Jason nailed it, and he was very forthcoming about his creative process and what it took to get White Lotus Season 3 in the can. So I know you'll dig this episode. And while you're surfing around online, I hope you also check out Backstory Magazine. It's our 13th year. We just published our new issue, which is our Emmys Contenders and Summer issue 56. You could see what's inside on our website. And it's also my 20th year of podcasting. And I'm just here to say, folks, I couldn't have done it without your support. I really appreciate it. If you've never read Backstory before, you could test drive us by reading us on our website, backstory.net, or on our iPad app, Backstory. So look, it would really mean a lot to me to have my podcast listeners and Apple Podcasts and Spotify and my YouTube watchers of the Backstory Magazine YouTube page, which is where you could see these Zooms that I'm recording. That's right, you could see us talk. It would really mean a lot to me to have you show your support for independent entertainment journalism. So thanks for considering becoming a subscriber. But now, without any further ado, let's jump right into our interview with actor Jason Isaacs about his performance in White Lotus Season 3, which is Emmy eligible. Jason, it's good to see you. How you doing, man?
Hey, man. I'm very, very good. But let me tell your readers and viewers how professional you are. You're the first person in 8 billion interviews that I've done recently, thank God, because I'm in something people wanted to watch, who said and reminded me to look at the little green light at the top and not look at you so that my eyes aren't slightly off and look a little deranged. And I said, isn't there an AI fix that does that for you? But I didn't tell you that I was at a Google retreat recently because I'm very, very geeky, and we can talk about AI at some point if you like. And they showed me some new communication protocol they have, which I don't think was top secret. I didn't sign an NDA. And it is as close to Princess Leia as you're ever going to get. The person is right in front of you. You feel like you can reach out and touch them. And my wife sat in the other room and spoke, and we just couldn't. We both just started screaming and yelling. It was so uncanny. And I think they're going to release it out soon. I'm not on a commission from Google. I'm not endorsing them. I'm just saying there is a thing where you look directly in someone's eyes and you feel like when they hold out an apple, you could take a bite of it. That technology
I guess that's a good place to start. Is this really you?
Oh, who knows?
I want to give people a baseline.
Go for it.
What gave you the theater bug? And tell us about your experience of finally going to school for it.
I didn't ever have it growing up. I wasn't one of those people who goes, I wanted to be an actor from the age of 10. I didn't see stuff. I loved watching television. That's all my family ever did. I sound educated because I can pronounce my T's. I'm English, but we were a very working class culture. We just sat and watched television. That's all we had. Television was always on in my house, and we would just watch it all the time. And it never in a million years occurred to me that those were jobs that people did for a living, that someone like me could do it. My dad had worked with his hands, a lot. And me and my brothers were the first of our generation to go to university, and we went to study to do professional jobs. So I have a doctor brother, I have a lawyer brother, and I went to study law. And I'd been at college about, 2 weeks or something. And I was so far out of my comfort zone, my social milieu. I'd already, as a kid, code switched a few times and changed my accent and changed my entire personality. I continued to do it, not just from place to place geographically, but also groups of people I worked with. I went to a quite nice school, but I was a pro skateboarder, and they were very rough street kids I skated with. So I had a different personality entirely. The kids I mixed with in the local area and went to youth clubs with were not the kids I went to school with. I essentially had some kind of different personality with them too. So I got to university, and they felt to me like they came from a different universe. They had accents I'd never heard before. They had country houses. They all seemed to being issued the same uniform from their very fancy private schools. And I mixed with them, and they were very friendly and lovely. But I felt like I had landed, in a different parallel dimension. It was all fine, except that I auditioned for a play because I was drunk in the Union building where all the kind of freshers clubs were starting out. And I was wandering around drunk, as was my want, there was a sign saying, audition, can you do a northern accent? One thing I thought was authentic about me that I was hiding was that I was from up north. I'm from Liverpool. And so I went into this room and I auditioned and they cast me in a play, which I thought all students did a play. That was one thing you did. You wore scarves, you drank cheap wine. You know, I had this cliched idea of what students did. My elder brother had been a student. I visited him. So I thought, oh, let's do a play, whatever that is. And I went into the rehearsal room the first time and I thought, this is a place where I don't need to be self-conscious about who I am outside here. The fact that I'm vulgar or suburban or, you know, whatever, that I'm not educated, that we don't have a country house. This is a place where you explore the human condition. And it was so much more interesting and stimulating than anything I'd ever done. It wasn't academic, it was physical and it was intellectual and it was emotional, which was not something I was in touch with. And I was hooked, completely addicted. Not thinking I did it professionally, but just as a hobby. I'm a man of extreme passions, and not to say addictive nature. And so I did play after play after play after play. And I essentially junked my law degree. I scraped through it, but I did nothing but plays. And then I took over the running of the society so I could decide what plays were put on. And I directed them and I took plays to Edinburgh every summer. It still never occurred to me in a billion years that you would ever pursue this professionally. But those people who did that, I don't know, they're just made from a different gene pool or something. It wasn't the world that I came from. But near the end of my university time, some of the other people had decided to audition for drama schools in London. It seemed to me the height of ludicrous hubris, you know, that we who have been playing at it could ever do these things for a living. So anyway, I was never going to do it. I was going to be a lawyer, but I did go and audition for drama school because it was only £10 because I'm very competitive. And I thought, fuck them. If they get in, I could get in, you know. And if I'd got in, I was going to save the letter, put it in the attic in a trunk to be discovered by relatives. And I went and auditioned for this thing and I did a second audition. And then this woman, Jane Cowell, who was a voice coach, tall, stately woman who sounded to me like Julie Andrews, she's very, very well spoken, came out. She said to me directly, she said, we'd very much like to offer you a place in September. Well, the world kind of froze. It was like one of those Guy Ritchie moments where he freezes everyone and moves the camera around. Yeah. And she said, I hope you're not fucking us around, young man. You realize that thousands of people apply for these fucking places. And I went, oh, no, I just, that's amazing. I just didn't, so, wow, great, thanks. And I walked down the street in Swiss Cottage, where the drama school I eventually went to was. And I just remember so vividly having this inner dialogue thinking, do I really want to do this? Is this what I want to do? Am I just letting it happen? Is it a conscious choice? I'm going to be poor. Do I want to be poor? Am I doing this just because a woman who sounds like Julie Andrews said fuck twice at me? You know, and I, to this day, I still don't know why I did it, but I went to drama school and here we are.
Well, that's an eye-opening experience for you, obviously. Do you remember a light bulb moment of kind of learning your craft?
No, I remember just loving everything about rehearsals and about performance and about, you know, let's put the show on right here, kids, taking a van up to the Edinburgh Festival and building the set and getting bad reviews and getting good reviews. I remember the thrill of people getting undressed in front of each other in the dressing room as if, oh, it doesn't matter. We're sure we can see each other naked, thinking, oh my God, there's naked ladies in here. I remember thinking that the conversations that you have about what makes human beings tick was so much more stimulating than any other conversation I was aware that anybody ever had. But the light bulb moment about doing it for a job, no, even when I left drama school, I thought, well, I've just been here for 3 years. I better do a job in the theatre one time. Or it'd be good to get a line or two on it in a television show. And I got a lead in a television show. And I went, I've done that, but I've not been in a movie. Well, I got a line in a movie and then it'd be great to have a big part in a movie. And then suddenly I have no skills and that's all I can do.
It's interesting to think about theatrical acting versus filmic acting, in which in theater, you have the rehearsal space. You get weeks, hopefully, to prepare before you put it on. Often in film, you do not have that liberty. What was that transition like for you to not really have the rehearsal time?
I miss the adrenaline. It's exciting being on stage. It feels, if you get something wrong, like the end of the world. It's not. You could just turn around and go, sorry, I forgot my line. But you don't, because there's the kind of pressure on you. I've coached corporate leaders in public speaking a couple of times as a favor, not for money. But it turns out, having done some research, because I had no idea what I was doing, so I looked online and then I just copied and told them stuff I found. But it turns out that people's biggest fear in life is public speaking. And they're more scared of that than death. If they go to a funeral, they would rather be in the box than giving the eulogy. And I understand why, because being on stage is electrifying and scary if you're doing it right. If you don't care and you go on stage, if you're casual about it, then you're not going to do it very well. And a lot of very, very well-known people are throwing up in their dressing room before they go on, even 6 months into the run. There's a fight or flight something. I miss that adrenaline on camera because you can always go again. But on the other hand, you get to go to different locations. You get to be spontaneous. You're not wedded to the script. You can, you can go slightly off piste, or you can make moments happen in a naturalistic way. So it's a different version of acting. And you don't have to share it with a person. When you're in the theater, it's always a question of calibrating. If you do it so the people in the front row see something real, the people in the back row don't see anything. If you do it so the people in the back row see something real, the people in the front row see an end of pier Renaissance show, So you have to pitch it a certain way, just in terms of what you share. You can't keep that many secrets, but the camera knows your secrets. And there was something about that I loved, maybe because I have been, and maybe still am, someone in life who feels like they have a lot of secrets, whose inner dialogue is different from their outer dialogue. The camera loves it when you say one thing and you mean another. And stories love it when you say one thing, mean another, but are actually driven by something about your character or soul that the audience understands and you don't get about yourself. It's much harder to do that on stage. Yeah, I love all of it. I love storytelling. I love story researching. Over the years, I've really come to love the bit that nobody sees, which is I get to go and shadow a heart surgeon for 3 days, or a politician, or a soldier, or people sit and tell me stories they've never told their partner or their children, and maybe they would have taken to their grave. And they tell me because I'm not a reporter, but I need to know what it feels like. That's one of the greatest privileges.
Again, some actors choose to go that pathway where they really create a backstory for their characters. Some like to just invent a little bit in their mind and live present tense. Tell me how you break down a script. When you get a script, what's your process of breaking it down? Are you highlighting everything? Are you using one?
I read it once and throw it away. I don't want to know the words.
Really?
Because I can learn lines. I can learn the phone book in 5 minutes. So I don't want to be familiar with the text. I know some people, supposedly Tony Hopkins, reads it dozens and dozens and dozens of times. Other people arrive with, Parker had this minutiae. She had different colored Post-its and stuff in her thing. I was impressed and intimidated by how forensically she broke down scripts. I don't want to see any of the directions that say he cries, he shouts, he punches the wall. I don't want to know other people's lines because I want to hear them like they're being said to me. I want to have a very loose grasp of my own. So on the day, I will take the sides, which is what they hand out on the day, which have the words on them, and I'll have them in my hand very often up until the last second. And there's some part of me thinking, I remember this. I don't want to embarrass myself or be anyone that wastes time on the set. I initially got that from the fantastic actor Bill Patterson. You know who Bill Patterson is? Yeah. Scottish actor who's in Local Hero and many other things.
Local Hero is an awesome movie, by the way. Hate to interrupt, but anyone that hasn't seen it, Criterion has put it out. It's fantastic. Search it out.
Such a good film. Anyway, one of my first main jobs beyond single days on things was in a TV series. And we shot at a studio and Bill Patterson was in the next studio shooting something. And I was a huge fan. I would go and spy and just watch them shoot. And I thought, he's not learning his lines because he had the script in his hand. And then I began to realize what he was doing. He was giving himself a very loose grasp. So he actually reached for the words like we do in life. We don't know what the next sentence is. And if you learn them too carefully, they can come out sometimes with a facsimile of life. But for me, they never feel like someone is finding the words. So I like to try and find the words.
That's what I was talking about. It's antithetical to your acting training, in which you have to learn everything.
That's true.
Theater. You can't on the day just have sides. So it's such a different type of acting. It's fascinating.
I mean, I've got used to it. I like the fact that I don't know what's going to happen in the scene. I mean, only roughly. I don't mean that I'm disrespectful to the writers or directors. I just mean that I worked with someone. I won't say who because they're entitled to the way they work. They would come before the scene every time and go, "Show me what you're going to do," and I go, "I don't know." And they go, "Well, I know what I need you to do." And I go, "Oh, well, I'd rather you didn't tell me because I don't want to be adhering to your roadmap. I don't have my own roadmap." And they went, "Well, let me, I do know the scene." And I went, "But the scene doesn't exist yet. So let's go see if I suddenly need to laugh or cry or turn around and walk away, whatever it is." Not that I'm, anarchic in some way. I love theater. I guess I'm being slightly disingenuous. I love theater when it's brilliant. I've been in a couple of brilliant things. I've been in a couple of mediocre things, and I've been in one thing that was shit. And I know when you do a film or a television series, you're filming new scenes all the time. Some of them go better, some of them go worse, some of them are well written, some of them, you can always work on something, try and improve it in the moment. Then when you walk away, that's the best it's going to be, and it's shot. You're not going to shoot it again. So it's done, and you think about the next one. Theatre, when it's not perfect and it's not working, even when it is working perfectly, you think, well, I mustn't do that again. I mustn't recreate that perfectly. It's got to be reinvented fresh every night. So very early on, I was in the first production in Britain of Millennium and Perestroika, Angels in America. And it was, I can't think of another word that doesn't sound obnoxious. It was perfect. Yeah. It was utterly brilliant. The writing was sensational, and the effect it had on us in it, but also everyone who saw it, was profound. Not only did they laugh for 7 hours and cry for 7 hours and think for 7 hours, they left changed. and they engage with the world in a different way. And ever since then, I've been on stage a few times, and they've sold out and done well. It hasn't approached the foothills of that. And so that's one of the reasons I barely do any stage work. I just don't want to be in something and know, we're getting to the scene where everybody unwraps their candy at this point, because I can always hear it. I was in a play once, it sold out, 5-star reviews. My voiceover agent, who was a big stinge at the time, she said, "Can you get me a ticket?" I said, "Darling, don't come. It's not very good, honestly." And she went, "You've got fabulous reviews." I go, "I'm not falsely modest. I'm telling you, it's not. I can feel the audience being bored. It's boring. The rehearsal didn't go well." She said, "You say that, you don't want to get me a free ticket." I said, "I'll get you a free row. All right, come." So she came to see it, and there was an interval. And at the end of it, I came out and went to the barman and I said, "You see my voiceover blonde woman is around?" He went, "She left this note for you." She left a note. She went, "You didn't say it was going to be this shit." And she went home at half time.
That's crazy. I mean, look, with having acted in that show, it could be hard to recreate, as you said, that kind of adrenaline.
I knew then that nothing would ever touch it. I was grateful for it, and I've been in some successful things.
Did you know in rehearsals?
No, I didn't know, but I do remember this, that the first time we read through the second play, it's 2 3.5-hour plays. The first time we read through the second play, which had never been performed at the time, it was about 8 hours, just the second play. And so the director wrote to Tony Kushner in America and went, "Dude, this is unsustainable. They're going to close the building down, switch the lights off. It's not very good." And we'd be in rehearsal rooms, and the fax would sputter to life. Those days, the fax didn't do separate sheets of paper, it just did a roll. So it would go, and it would start spinning out, and we would look at it, and we would walk backwards as it unscrolled across the floor. And it would say something like, "Cut scenes 25 to 47. You're like, "What?"
Wow.
That's all there. And they go, "Insert this instead." And it was like the fax was wired up to heaven. This work of genius would come out and you go, "Just gold." You knew when you're performing, and not when you're rehearsing, but when you're performing, that you had the audience in the palm of your hand, and they were about to fall out of their seats laughing, and then they were going to choke crying, and then there'd be a silence that you could hear people blink, And so you did know that it was something very, very unusual going on in the theatre, yeah.
I wonder if he's released his papers and if some of those cut scenes will be in them one day. Because as you know, I love searching that stuff out. So now you have me really, really curious.
It's funny. People didn't like Perestroika as much because Millennium was mounted first, because there's a lot of angels being very confused. The stuff in the scenes are more challenging than the first one. And a friend of my parents came to see it. My parents don't have many sophisticated intellectual friends. That's not who they are. It's not the world they come from. And so some very kind of London friends came. I said, "It's 2 3.5-hour plays. I'll get you tickets." They went, "Just get us for the first one, be all right." And I said, "Don't worry, it's sold out. There's queues around the block. I'll get you tickets for both. If you don't want to see the second one, I won't be at all offended. I'll be able to get rid of them." And so they came to both, and they came to the dressing room. And I said, "Did you like it?" And there were a few people in the dressing room. Someone said, "I found the second play a bit complicated." And she went, this woman who had no kind of education, left school at 15 to be a go-go dancer and stuff, went, "What's complicated about it? It's really simple. God or angels or anyone, you're never going to get it. You just got to move forward. There may not be a perfect solution. You just got to walk forward into the wind." And I went, "That's exactly what it is. Nothing more and nothing less than exactly that." So it was thrilling to be part of that and to see what it did to people. Also, it was a play about all kinds of issues, about the people who were dying in the streets of AIDS, a play about the right-wing government that was in America. And I remember Salman Rushdie came to see it. There was a fatwa out on him. He hadn't been seen in public. Anyway, he was seen in public. There was a danger someone was going to set a bomb. So we came out and did the first scene, Stephen Delane and I, and we go off and we went, "Holy shit, do you see who's in the third row?" It was Salman Rushdie with 2, what they call special branch of the police force that do things like guard people, who are under death threats. And those 2 men did not sign up to come and watch a 7-hour gay fantasia. That was not their idea of a good night out. They had those giveaway moustaches on, and they were looking around the theatre. They weren't really looking for bomb threats. They just didn't want to look at me have sex with Daniel Craig. And by the end of 7 hours, they were standing on the street, crying their eyes out, clapping. And I remember thinking, if we've affected them and we've changed them, then this is a special piece.
Well, and that's the power of theater. And also, again, I say it's a communal experience. So everybody, regardless of what their orientation preferences are going in, they all are able to come together behind, a master work.
You're right, but there's also some kind of societal pact. You've gone in there and you said, "I won't talk. I won't check my phone. I won't pass candy or, potato chips. I know you don't have a full set and special effects. I will lend you my imagination. I will meet you halfway. You tell me that this is, set when Baghdad is falling, then I'm in Baghdad with you. And you don't have to do the other stuff for me." And that you don't get that in film. In film, it's like you're looking through the keyhole and you go, "Well, show me Baghdad." And I'm going to talk to my friend, I'm going to check my email. But the theatre is a different thing. And by the way, when we started this discussion talking about AI, I think the theatre will become increasingly a place of power and importance and a magnet for people to gather. I hope so.
Yeah. Okay, I want to take you from that high bar of this once-in-a-lifetime experience to your lowest point. What was your worst audition? What was the audition?
Oh, Jesus, there's so many. My God.
Yeah, give us a playlist
worst
of
audition.
worst auditions.
When I came out of drama school, I auditioned for commercials as well, just for anything, to make some money. And I remember being sent to this guy. There's camera, little X on the floor of tape, stand there, and some guy too cool for school, tortoise shell glasses, polo neck, lounging on a beanbag somewhere, going, in my imagination, he had a cigarette holder, I'm sure he didn't. And he went, all right, so this is for Black Magic, the chocolates box? And I went, yeah. But when I was a kid, we had Black Magic box. He goes, right, so, Rudolph Valentino, so Douglas Fairbanks Jr., all those adventure films. I went, yeah. He goes, so you ride in across the desert on a camel and you see the fort there and you come up to the fort and the drawbridge, you jump, or you stand on the camel, you jump, you get on the drawbridge as it goes up and it takes you up onto the turret, and then a bunch of bad guys come, you pull your sword out, scimitar, you're fighting them, you take the belt off, you tie a couple of them, so you're fighting with a ribbon and thing, and you kill them, and then you can see in the tower across the courtyard, you see the princess. She's in there in the tower. So you grab hold of some of the, the material that's there, and you jump and it rips, and you swing right the way across the courtyard into the tower, and you fight your way up the spiral staircase. Bad guys coming down, fight their way up. Sometimes they come up behind you as well. Got to turn around, kick them. You get in there. There's the princess. So suddenly you go duck, get someone behind her, and then the princess looks at you, and you put your hand inside your robe. She thinks it's going to be a knife. You've come to kill her. You pull out a box of chocolates, and you narrow your eyes in that Rudolph Valentino way that made all of America orgasm, and you hand out the chocolate. And the thing says, Black Magic. I went, wow, that's fantastic. He went, in your own time. I went, excuse me? He went, in your own time. I went, what, do all that? He went, yeah. And I went, yeah, all right. Yeah, sure. And so I started miming, but since I wasn't sure he could tell I was miming, I was narrating at the same time. I went, I'm on a camel, I'm on a camel, I'm on a camel. Standing there, I thought, oh, hold on a second. The camera's on my mouth. I better ventriloquize. And I went, I'm on a camel. I've got the toilet, and find the bill. Anyway, I did that for about 5 minutes and I left and I went straight to my agent's office off Broadwick Street. And I went in and I went, that's the last time I auditioned for a television commercial. And it was.
That's a pretty bad audition.
Yeah, it was bad.
I'm guessing you did not get it.
I did not get the job. I'll tell you another one I didn't get. I went in once and the script outside, which they don't normally have, and it said, it was basically a scene from Blade Runner where Harrison Ford is sitting with a photograph and goes, in Hans right, zoom in left, pan down, where he looks at a photograph of people and he sees something. So it's got all this dialogue, zoom in, pan right, pan left, go down, pull out, go right. And then in the script, they go in and he's looking through the window of a cafe and you can see just behind the sign of the cafe, two people holding hands and then drinking a particular coffee. I think it was now for a coffee brand. So I go, oh, I could do that. I could do an American accent and I think I could do that. I haven't shaved, that's good, a bit of stubble like he's got. And I go in and there's some other twat sitting there and he goes, right, put your hand out on the table. I go, what? He goes, put your hand out. Let me fun. And I go, wait a second. I'm auditioning for the fucking hand through the cafe sign and I didn't get it.
That's pretty bad. Well, I think your fans...
Do you want another 50?
Yes.
Richard Dreyfuss, bad audition for Richard Dreyfuss. Jesus Christ.
I want the worst. I want the worst. I think your fans will always know you as, Dr. Guy Chadbot from This is David Lander, your 1988 first official role that I could have found.
Well done, you.
Nothing's really come after it that I know of. So
nothing's topped it.
Talk about Dr. Guy Chadbot. What can you tell us about getting your first role, which I think was for television? Maybe that was a film.
You know what? There were a few first days, and I can't quite remember. I think I went, this is what I think my first day was. I was sent off to audition for, I was 25, my ass was hanging out of my jeans, and I was sent off to audition for the lead handsome person, Prince, whatever it was, in some kind of Mills and Boon romance type, one of those, the equivalent of Towering Inferno, where everybody who wasn't working was in it. So it was one of those, Barbara Cartland, who wrote 12 romance novels a day, all of which were filmed. It was one of those things. So I go in, and everybody is older than me. They've all got nice clothes and nice suits and 90-degree jaws and blinding white teeth and thick hair. And I thought, what am I doing? This is so stupid, me being here. Oh, well, I'll get to meet the director and read a scene. And the director's assistant, some very flustered 24-year-old called Sally, went, sorry, could you come in here, Jason? Hi, do you want to read the scene? And I said, am I not going to meet the director? She went, no, I'm doing some of the auditions. And I thought, oh, God, my worst paranoia has been realized I'm being palmed off because clearly he's walked through the room and gone, not that fella. And I said, I really thought I was going to meet the director. She said, well, I'm meeting people as well. I said, well, I'd like to meet the director. So she picked up the phone. She went, John, so there's an actor here, Jason Isaacs. I think he was told he was going to be meeting you. Yeah, no, I told him that. No, what? Yes. Oh, okay. She puts the phone down. She goes, he's coming in. And he came in, didn't look at me at all. He said, did you pick up the clothes? Just honest, yeah. Okay. Make sure my wife knows, okay? And walked out again. I thought, oh, this has gone great. And I left and I went back to my agents and just like off the commercial casting, I went, don't send me up for parts I'm not going to get when I'm going up against handsome leading men who've done a bunch of work. She said, well, they've just called. I went, to say what? They went, to say, you're not going to get that part, but will you play Man with Pike? And I said, excuse me? They said, will you play Man with Pike? And I said, what? No. I just left drama school. I want to play a man with a pike. He hasn't even got a name, man with pike. She said, well, it's £691. And I went, where is it and when does it start? Because that was more than I'd earned in, my entire life. And she said, well, hold on, they're faxing over the script now. And they faxed 2 pages over and she stapled it together and then she brought it over and it was scene 67, I think. And we saw scene 66. We saw scene 68 and we couldn't see scene 67. And then the assistant who'd stapled the paper went, it's under the staple. I lifted it up and it said, there is a man with a pike standing in the doorway. The sergeant comes up. He says, beats being a coachman, Sarge. And the sergeant says, keep your eyes to the front, you horrible little dwarf. And I thought, I'm a horrible little dwarf. How big is this guy? Anyway, she said, it's up to you. And I go, 691 quid? No question. I'm in. Yeah, sure. Great. Fine. Sorry I said anything. And I drove myself to this place. There were loads of people. They were friendly. Their breakfast, I sat and chatted. And everyone was really friendly, actually, and really, really nice. And then they read out all the names and I wasn't on it to go over. And I went, sorry, I didn't hear my name, but I'm pretty sure I'm working this morning. They went, what agency are you from? And they listed these 3 agents. I said, not from Roxanne Backer. And they went, Roxanne Backer? That's not one of those extras agents. And I went, extras? I'm not an extra. I've got a line. They went, what are you doing in here? It's the extras tent. I went, oh, and suddenly all of my erstwhile friends looked at me askance, like I had somehow broken into the Masonic Lodge. And I went over to where the actors are meant to be, and none of those people spoke to me at all. I was in a suit of armor, and they all had chairs with their names on it, and I leant against the wall stiffly like that. And I watched. I'd never been, it definitely was my first day because I'd never seen a film shoot before. And I tried to learn what people were talking about, this weird language and all this stuff. And then near the end of the day, as the sun was starting to go down, I saw that Sally, the assistant who'd met me the first place, she came running towards me and she went, oh, Jason, I'm so glad I caught you. I'm going to ask you a huge favor. Huge favor. I did your contract and I said, can I interrupt you? I said, I think you're going to ask me to come back tomorrow because we didn't get to my scene, which I would be so excited to do. I've never been on a film set before. It's so lovely. Everyone's been so great, but I'm new and I've got this new agent. I feel like I'm going to have to ask her, but if she says okay, then that's fine by me. I'll do whatever. But I'm loving it here. She went, oh, thank you so much. She disappeared and I ran as fast as you can run in a suit of armor, which is not very fast, to the nearest payphone. And I fished inside the armor and the chainmail into the little pocket I had in there. I took out 10p and I put it in the phone box and she answered and I went, there's no fucking way I'm coming back here tomorrow unless they pay me another 691 quid. She went, of course they will. And I went, oh, I love this job. Anyway, that was it.
Being on set and not shooting is a great day to read a book.
I was just frightened. I mean, she did want me to come back for free. That's the thing.
Oh.
The agent went, don't worry. That's why you've got an agent. It's never going to happen. When I went to say my first line ever, cameras on me, I'd said to the guy already, who's quite famous, I won't malign him, and I said, what's the story of, I say, beats being a coachman, Sarge. Well, we were coachmen together somewhere? He goes, what? I go, what's the line about being, well, were we coachmen and this is better than things? He went, I don't fucking know. Just say your line. I went, all right, okay, sorry. Anyway, it got to my bit. The camera's pointing at me. And I said, action. He walked up. I was about to speak. And he said, keep your eyes to front, you horrible little dwarf. And cut my line. And I thought, that's it. I'm never going to get to say my line. The camera was still on me. And I went, keep your eyes to front, horrible little dwarf. And the director went, cut. Jason, sorry, what did you do? And I said, I just made fun of him again. Yeah, don't do that. I said, right, okay, sure. While we stopped, mate, I think I've got a line there. Well, this has been cut. The continuity person said, no, you do have a line. And he said very, very loudly, straight out of drama school, are we, darling? Maybe you should learn to pick up your cues. And I said, because I don't like that kind of shit. I said, yeah, because if I talk over you, can they use that? Or is that just ruins the take, does it? And he went sheepish. What do I? It was my first day and my first indication that sometimes it's a battleground.
And you stood your ground. That's a great retort.
I did. I haven't always. I've been bullied quite a lot. People can tell people who are all right to bully. There were quite a few directors who early on really brutal to me, but I don't like it anymore. Look, some people join the police force because they want to make the world a better place, and some people join it because they want to have power. Some people direct because they want to, they literally want to enable people to tell human stories, and others because they want to be in charge.
I want to play the hits for a minute or two and just talk about some of the projects that I saw you in when I was kind of first discovering your career. And just,
should we tell everybody we shared a house at some point?
No, we're going to get to the house.
We're going to get to it. Okay, fine.
And so it's just, if you remember a favorite day or something that you did that was cut, or just a favorite moment on set, that's fine. Event Horizon, I think, was the first thing that I saw you in. I gotta say, I read that script because I was doing development stuff out of film school. I read that script and I'm like, how are they going to make it? Because there was this element of the script that definitely ended up in the movie, but I could see why that movie got made, because it was all about when the hyperdrive or whatever it was would turn on at night.
Exactly.
Everybody would just freeze and weird things would happen. And it was so mysterious and beautiful. I really loved the script. The movie I still like a lot, by the way.
Not as much as the script.
But there was something in the script that they just couldn't get on screen. And it was, I'm sure, time and money, like nobody's artistic fault, because it was on the page. What was your favorite memory of that?
Well, first of all, so Chuck Pogue, who I worked with many years ago, one of my first American film, Dragonheart, said that making a movie for a writer is a process of continual diminishment. From your head to the page, from your page to the shooting draft, from the shooting draft to the set, to the edit and stuff. So the fact that you read a script and loved it and the film didn't quite live up to it is a pretty standard experience. It doesn't say anything about the film. It says about the process of reading things. When you read it, your imagination is unlimited. And then film is a practical thing, and it is limited, but So Paul and Jeremy, the director and producer, were friends of mine. I still like them a lot, I just haven't seen them forever. And they had made a film called Shopping. When I was doing Angels in America, Jeremy, who I'd been at university with, said, I want you to come and be in this film and meet this director. I said, well, I'm doing a play and I'm doing a television series. He goes, it doesn't matter. Well, one scene, you should come and meet him. He's going to be great. I'm hitching my wagon to him. He's really talented. And I met Paul Anderson, Paul W.S. Anderson, not Paul Thomas Anderson. And I liked him a lot. And he got a rep company around him, me, Sean Pertwee, and, various other people. And he was going to make Soldier because he made Mortal Kombat. It was a huge hit. And so he went to Hollywood and everybody said, what do you want to do? There was a script, a script. I can't remember the guy who wrote Soldier, but I think the guy who wrote Soldier, I want to say wrote Blade Runner. Right? So Kurt Russell wanted a year to build his body up. Kurt Russell had been a big hit. So he needed something to fill in the year. So Event Horizon, although Event Horizon has in retrospect been a much bigger hit and is still a massive cult hit, was the thing that he did just to fill in time before Soldier. We were friendly and Jeremy was right. I was really glad I met him because he cast me in Event Horizon and Sean and then this fabulous ensemble. We all became very tight because it was a bit like doing a play because we're on the same set every day. There's no other actors who come in. There's no new locations. There's just us, the Event Horizon and the Lewis and Clark. Paul gave us all tremendous leeway to come up with flesh our characters out, make them interesting. I said the least of a lot of people. So I gave myself, and it became a pattern in my life, gave myself the best props I could think of. Gave myself a fishing vest, essentially, full of tools, some of which are medical, some of which don't really exist, that looked like they were futuristically medical. And because I was a man of a few words, my brother is a doctor, and he's always unrelentingly grim. He said, I've got this thing. He doesn't go, yeah, it's a thing people get in their elbow, don't worry. He hits you with a Latin word straight away. And he says it very seriously, like you're actually stage 5 terminal cancer. And what he's really saying is you pulled a tendon. And so I thought, well, what about I'll do that as a character? I'll be unrelentingly grim. Sure enough, in the first scene when he introduced himself, I go, DJ, trauma. They all burst out laughing. And that became a pattern. They think DJ's an idiot because he takes himself too seriously, which is great to have a character. And the other thing I remember about that, I remember lots about it. It's become a huge hit in I go to convention world. It tanked completely for no good reason at all. It's a fabulous film. Paul made it brilliantly, I think. There's a myth that has built up that there's a whole other director's cut with a whole bunch of other shocking stuff in it. As far as I'm aware, that's just not true at all because the ship goes to hell when the driver's on. It went to hell. We found it when it came back, and everybody on it has these visions of hell or something. I don't quite know what the rules are, but they see things. Two things to say about that. One is that Paul's best mate at the time, Barrett, shot second unit stuff that was meant to be what we saw in Monsters, which is the previous crew in hell. And he shot things that I'm sure were probably illegal then. They're certainly illegal now. You couldn't get away with. He had, porn stars and amputees and people from bondage clubs. And he had people doing things that all I know is he would wander over to our set with this kind of 1,000 yards Vietnam stare and go, I've seen some things today, man. We all wondered what they were, and Paul used them very judiciously in the final cut. You flash to them, but you never linger on them long enough to see people pulling their fake eyes out of their sockets or fisting or whatever they're doing. So this myth that's built up that there was more of that footage in there, it's my opinion that I don't think there is because I don't think it would have worked had you seen more of it. I know it was a fast edit. They had to produce it as a fast edit, so maybe they would have liked more time, but I don't think the stuff they missed. And the other thing that springs to mind is that about 3 or 4 of the characters get visions of the things that either the worst thing that could happen to them or something that makes you feel guilty, or it's not quite the same thing for each person, but it's something. They are touched by hell. And I didn't have one in the script, but I figured that DJ was having them. Yeah. He had to have them. They are all having them. None of them are immune to it. He's very worried and wants to get off the ship. So I asked for, and Paul just, enabled everyone to do what they felt was right, for a scar that went from my neck to my navel, as if I'd had a major operation when I was young. And my hellish trauma was that opened up again. And I did that because I knew that at the end of the film, when I do get killed, I'm hung up naked by hooks, and that my body has been opened from my neck to my navel and all my organs have been pulled out. So I figured whenever you see, a lot of times you see he's touching a scar, he's feeling a scar, it's itching. And when we shot that thing, they did a plaster cast of my body. I remember this. It's a big open warehouse. And they went, all right, come in, get naked, tie your hands to the thing. And I went, get naked. And tie my hands to a cross for 4 hours while you put. They went, oh, Kate Winslet was just in here. We did a thing for Jude, so she give birth out of our family. And I went, well, good for Kate Winslet. I am not standing here naked, strapped to a cross. I'm going to wear my underpants, and you can approximate whatever you like downstairs. Anyway, I did stand there, tied to a cross in just in a little pair of white fronts when they encased me in plaster. And every now and again, they just come with a little spatula and make the space for nose. And they kept on saying, "You're doing so well, mate. You're doing so well, so well." Because I guess other people get very claustrophobic. I really liked it. I don't know. There was something very comforting about that. Anyway, they make this body that they then study you. I go in on the day of work and to do it, and it's got every hair, every broken vein. It's my perfect eye color, all the eyebrows in the right place. Everything about it. It's me, gutted from neck to navel, with organs hanging out. And I said, "Can I have this? When you finished, when we shot, can I have it?" And they went, "No, mate, it's really expensive." And I went, "What the fuck are you going to do with it?" It's me, naked with my guts out. Because I don't know, mate, it's like $100,000. And I went home and I said to my wife, "Do you know, they wouldn't let me have the naked thing of me." And she went, "What the fuck do you think we were going to do with it? Have it over the kitchen table?" I went, "Oh, good point, I suppose." Didn't really think about that, yeah.
That would have been incredible. Look, I'm glad that the movie has a cult status because people didn't know what to do with it when it came out.
It's people love it so much now, it makes no sense. The opening night, when films don't do well, it's always the marketing that's blamed. And it very often isn't the marketing. But in this instance, it feels like it might have been because opening night, Larry Gordon and Lloyd Levin produced. Larry Gordon, a veteran producer, told us great stories about when he produced The Warriors, one of my favorite films. And he said, "Here's what we're going to do, kids. We're all going to get in a limo. We're going to go from theatre to theatre. We'll stand at the back. We'll watch some Scream, watch some clap. And then we're all going to go for dinner." So we go to the first theatre, or cinema as we call it. And we pulled up. He went, "Let me just speak to the box office." He went out and he spoke to the box office. He came back. He went, "You know what? Let's just go for dinner." And I thought, hold on a second, that doesn't sound right. So yeah, very disappointing. But it's failures that are making of you. And I remember Paul, for whom that must have been very, very disappointing, went on to make Soldier, which really didn't do well either. And instead of feeling sorry for himself or being grumpy, he just went, "Okay, well, that was a good lesson. I learned a lot of things from that. I'm going to do something else now." And he sat and he wrote a pilot for TV, another pilot, and then eventually he made Resident Evil, and he came back onto the top of the Hollywood pile. Never got negative, never got bitter, never, went around screaming about the marketing, which I've seen a few times. Relentlessly positive person.
The marketing was off because it's serious sci-fi. It wasn't "let's hunt the aliens." It was really like, we have our worst demons inside of us, and sometimes they're unleashed. And I mean, there's a lot to it, but nonetheless, I'm glad to have heard about the possibility of a version of you strung up over your kitchen table, because that would have been incredible.
Well, no, what they did, right, but what actually happened in the film, in the original cut, it started inside my body and it came out and it corkscrewed around and revealed it. And it was just too disgusting for audience. It was so disgusting, probably I would have thought topped the deaths that were to come. It was an early indication. A few times I've been in sequences in films that really work and are fabulous. And the director's gone, "Oh my God, that sequence is amazing." And I've gone, "Great." And they go, "I've got it." I go, "What?" And they go, "Well, it throws the balance of the film off because X comes next." Right. And it shouldn't be more exciting or scary or whatever it is. It shouldn't be funny.
Armageddon, another sci-fi flick with a lot of cool people in the cast at the time.
Yeah.
And a lot going on. What's your favorite memory from Armageddon?
I had a tricky time on Armageddon. I was offered one of the astronauts and I couldn't do it because I was busy. So I was offered a consolation prize of Professor Quincy. And he was only meant to work 8 days over the 6 months, but they were going to pay for me to be, living in California, which is great. I could do other auditions and stuff. And on the first day, Michael liked what I was doing and said, "Hey, do we have you for the run of the picture?" And I went, "I mean, yeah, technically." But he goes, "Awesome. All right, I'm going to give you a clipboard. We'll stick you next to Billy Bob. We'll throw you a line here and there." And I was like, "Oh, great. Thanks so much." Thinking, fuck, please don't. And so my best memory is I went to this, I got to go on the space shuttle and the stealth bomber, and I got to meet 4-star generals. I got to go. I remember we all went to Edwards Air Force Base. At some point, they took us all into a place that the colonel who led us, he goes, "All right, I'm going to shut the door on this hangar, and you should all know that this will be the quietest, darkest place on planet Earth. And it's going to be very disturbing emotionally in every way in your senses. I suggest you reach out and hold each other's hand." And we're like, "Hold each other's hand? Fuck off." They closed the doors and life was over. It was, Earth pre-Big Bang. It's where they test the stealth bomber. They need to hear the slightest ping. And it was so disconcerting that we all reached out and held each other's hand. I remember that.
That's wild. Moving on from Armageddon, The Patriot was a really big role.
Yeah, that was a huge breakthrough for me.
It was a huge breakthrough. You're not there with a clipboard on that movie. You have a lot of heavy lifting to do. And I'm sure it was probably a little intimidating, but you really eased into the role.
It wasn't intimidating because, first of all, it wasn't on offer to me. It was on offer to Jude Law. Jude had not given them an answer quick enough. So in my auditions, one of which I did myself and put myself on tape decades before self-tape was a thing, and said, I was told by the agent, "You're not going to get this job. They just want to make Jude sign, but it's good for you to come to the attention of studio people. And then they got in touch and said, we want to fly him over and see if he can do in the flesh what he did on his tape. And my agent goes, just so you know, I know everybody involved, and this is to let Jude know they're flying someone in to make him sign. But no, they will fly you in. They'll put you in a hotel for a week, we'll get you other meetings. I'm like, okay, great. So there's no pressure on me. I didn't think there was a chance in a million of me getting this job, because you're right, it was a huge break. It was a very big part, and I wasn't well known and stuff. I'd done the lead in British things and British telly particularly. So I went in and met them, and I thought, I had nothing to lose. I figured I wasn't getting the job anyway. And they were incredibly nice and warm to me. And I left, and the phone rings, and my agent goes, you were in there for hours. I said, I think they really liked me. Obviously it's going to go to Jude, but it felt good. But then we didn't hear for weeks. And actually, during those weeks, they had to get the tape to Mel. There was no internet. They had to physically deliver it. And they had to ask Jude if he minded withdrawing, which he did. So graciously, for which I thanked him many times. I didn't feel intimidated. I'll tell you why, because I got there to start the process, and this process, there was costumes and all this stuff in LA, and then we went down to Carolina for a long time, and before we were shooting, me, Mel, and Heath just rode horses every day and practiced sword fighting and loading and firing muskets, and we'd go to the hotel, and Mel would go, we're getting paid for this, so I had a good time and I bonded. But more than that, the script arrived the first day with a note from Dean Devlin, the producer, and it said, if you have any thoughts, any feedback, any ideas at all ears, call me. So I called Dean and I said, look, you don't know me very well. That's a dangerous thing to put on a note. I have a billion ideas, but you don't have to listen to them. I'm thrilled to have the job. He goes, no, come over to the house. So I go over to Dean's house and I spend, 4 or 5 hours there. And Dean, who used to be an actor himself, and he became a producer because Roland Emmerich, who he was working with, said, do you have any ideas? And Dean's like, yeah. And he rewrote his own scenes. That's right. Roland said, will you rewrite some of the other scenes? That's where he eased into producing. So I had some ideas and he went, these are great. Let me call Roland. I said, well, you tell them to him. He said, no, Roland needs to sit down and hear this stuff from you. So the next day I went to Roland's office and we sat there for 5 or 6 hours. He said, let me call Bob Rodat. And I went, no, not Bob Rodat. He's got an Oscar, or he's got an Oscar nomination for Saving Private Ryan. Right. Said, no, he'll listen. It'd be great. And then we sat with Bob and for hours and hours and hours, and I had these various ideas and they pretty much were all incorporated into the script. So they were so collaborative and generous. And Mel was such a smart storyteller. He wanted the bad guy to be empowered. Now, he wasn't writing or directing it, but he could have objected to things. So by the time we came to shoot, I felt like I had a place at the table. Yeah. Which is what I hope I do to other people if I'm producing, and I've occasionally directed, what I know Mike does. In fact, the best directors do. I remember seeing David Yates do it to the kids on Harry Potter. Making them, what do you think? What do you feel? Well, you know the part better than I do. What do you think? Yeah, I didn't feel intimidated. Mel was actually constantly trying to get me when we were doing the fights. The stunt guys came up within a couple of weeks. They said, it's not for 6 months, but let's start working on the end fight now. We want it to be amazing. Here's what we think for choreography. And they showed us this thing where, Mel just cut me to ribbons and I maybe scored his arm a bit. Then he stabbed me through the stomach and then I, headbutted him, but then he took my legs away and he, hamstrung me and Mel goes, Jace, come on. He goes, tell him. I go, what? He goes, I know exactly what you're thinking. You're thinking the same thing I am. We've discussed it already. You tell them. And I went, the thing is, guys, I need to look better than Mel in the fight. I need essentially to win the fight, except for the last turn. What do you mean? I said, I'm a better swordsman. I'm a trained British officer. He's not. The only reason he beats me right at the end is because he remembers his dead son and he plays a fake out on me. Other than that, I should cut him to ribbons. But he's Mel Gibson. And I go, I know. They all know he's Mel Gibson. So he was constantly encouraging me to have those conversations. Yeah, very, very generously and appropriately, creatively. They made me feel like I belonged at the top table with them, which is the only way to feel creative.
Look, it's a dangerous thing to do because I firmly believe that the Hitchcockian method is a valid way to go forward in which everything's worked out. You get to set.
Sure, Hitchcock didn't do that.
You put all your best stuff into it, but I love collaboration and I love hearing that they were open to it. Actors sometimes have bad ideas, as you know.
No, they very often have bad ideas. And a good director will go, not that. Or if you've got enough time, shoot that and go, great, we've got that one. Let's do one this way. No, actors shouldn't be allowed to just write their own lines, do their own stuff. It's just, if you have a good idea.
Note, Jason. That's a great note of you're right. The end battle is much better. And it would have been worse the other way, clearly.
I remember this halfway through the film. There's a point at which Mel comes and busts Heath out. I've got Heath captioned and takes his dogs back and walks by me and says, in the script, it said, walks up to him face to face and says, before this war is over, I'm going to kill you. And it said in the script, for the first time we see Tamington scared. He steps back a step. I went to Roland and I went, do you want me to do that? He goes, why? I said, because then the film's over. If I'm scared now, there's nothing left. I can't be scared of him. And he goes, okay, so simply what you want to do? And I said, something else. He goes, like what? And I went, I don't know. He goes, sure, so let's do it. And I went, well, should I tell Mel? He goes, no, let's make it live. So Mel walks up to me and he goes, before this war is over, I'm going to kill you. And I take my sword out very slowly. And I turn it around and offer him the handle. And I went, why wait? And he looked absolutely furious. And his eyes darted around. I thought he looked over at Roland, and his eyes darted around. He saw all the soldiers that were there, and he looked back at me. You know, he went with the improv because he's professional, but he was fucking angry, I thought. And he turned around, and then he said, soon. And he got on his horse to ride off, and Roland said, cut. And I ran up to him, and I went, Mel, I'm so sorry, man. Roland encouraged me. I would have told you. He went, I fucking loved it. So, you know, proper actors like that stuff.
That's an incredible improv moment as well. I mean,
it bothered me that in the cut, it's close, you can't see the sword. I think you know what's happening and why wait is the line, but I took the sword out and handed it to him. But the other one I remember actually in Patriot, you know, they gave me the biggest horse. It's a great thing to do for a bad guy, and a fantastic entrance. So I ride in and I shoot children. Like, there is no greater way for a villain. And the hero is too intimidated or scared to run at me because he knows he'd die. You know, he doesn't suddenly go Rambo on me. He just has to watch. It's fantastic, the well-written thing by Bob Roda. And I'm in there and on the horse, and I'm standing and I have these lines, which is like a lesson in the rules, all these arrogant lines. And then it's done. I shoot the kid. Well, the close-up was done not on a horse, because the horses are spinning around and crapping all the time, but on a stepladder with two beefy men with tattoos kind of rocking me. And, you know. So I'm standing, and the cameras, a couple of cameras on me, and it rolls, and I say all my lines, and I shoot the kid, and then they're still rolling. I never say cut. It's not my job to say cut, someone else saying it, but they're still rolling. I'm thinking, do I have another line? I don't think I've got another line. Bloody hell. Is someone else going to say something? Has Roland forgotten about me? And eventually, because they're still looking at me, I go, stupid boy. And then they go, cut. And I go to Roland, and I go, why were you still rolling? He went, for that. And that stupid boy became a motif in the film later on. It always bothers me when directors go action and actors go straight into the scene and don't ease into it. And it always bothers me when they go cut on the last word of the written dialogue, because you never know what you're going to get.
Just for our podcast listeners, I swear to you, we're going to get to White Lotus, but Jason and I love catching up, if you haven't noticed.
This is my autobiography here.
We're going to keep going. I would be remiss if I didn't bring up Blackhawk Down, directed amazingly by Sir Ridley Scott.
Sure.
And just what was a favorite memory from that? Because there were so many great moments in that movie.
It wasn't shooting. We went to Fort Benning. We improvised for a week, and essentially they made me the commander. Since I was Captain Steele in charge of the Rangers, I was at 40, notionally in charge of all these 21-year-old Tom Hardy and, you know, Josh Hartnett and Ewan McGregor, who were actually the stars of the film. But they played along with it for a week. I was meant to, you know, run from the front and carry the heaviest load. It was a nightmare. But anyway, it was great and an honor. And we met the families of the people who died, the boys who died there, and we met the survivors. They all came. They'd all had very different reactions. Some people, it was the making of them. Some people, it was the breaking of them. Sure. One person had become a chaplain and found God, and other was sang about it all the time. And they all had some version of PTSD. A lot of them were all wearing hearing aids because they were in a 15-hour firefight, and, you know, their hearing had gone. And in the night, before we were due to leave, we were passed a note under our doors with a Ranger coin attached. A Ranger coin is something that every army regiment has a coin. And if you're really in dire straits, you can show it, and people are obliged to buy your drink. You're meant to be able to show it in times of difficulty. We were given Ranger coins each, and a note from all 17, I think I've got the number right, 17 of the boys who died. Wow. From them. And it said, please tell our story true. It was sorry, I'm getting a bit emotional here. It was the bad grammar of it even. We all felt moved by and compelled by it to try and get our own egos out of the way and try and at least recreate this thing honestly. And that's a moment I remember.
It's an incredible movie. I mean, I've been wanting to rewatch it for a while, especially the sense of disorientation that is present.
Ridley was quite something to see close up. I remember there was a day when Ridley had banks of monitors in front of him. Numbers of cameras that were in fixed positions, some which were in amongst the soldiers, some which were, you know, disguised, some which were hidden in locations you couldn't see them, a couple in helicopters. So it was like watching David Bowie, Man Who Fell to Earth, you know, he's got all the monitors in front of him. He's standing there smoking a cigar, having a great time. And in a moment of pause, because I watched him go, camera 3 needs to raise up 18 inches, camera 7, I want you to go open the shutter another 4 degrees, camera 8, you need this ratio, run this at 31 frames per second. It was just in utter mastery and control of the craft of it all. I went up and I said, is this stressful if you told me? He went, this? I could do this shit in my sleep. He said, and he could. It was watching someone, you know, watching Mozart compose. It was really extraordinary.
I think he's incredible. I can't believe how fast he's able to output films these days. It's just so
well, you know, he's getting on, but he's no less talented. His vision is not even slightly dimmed. It's amazing.
It really is. And, you know, you said earlier that there was a funny sequence from the Harry Potter movies that was cut. Getting into Harry Potter really quick, that's how a lot of people also came to know of you. What reflections would you have? And I know that's its own podcast, and we're not going to stick with it too long.
That's his own podcast. I mean, it's 6 films over 10 years.
Tell us what was cut that you wanted to tell us about earlier.
We were all given an enormous amount of autonomy and license to create our own characters and come up with our own looks. And amazingly, for films based on books that are gospel to many people, when people know every punctuation mark, we were given freedom to improvise lines and make lines up and, you know, I think J.K. Rowling understood that film is a different medium, and she was not involved in any of the filming. I never saw her on set. I met her once at an award show for 2 minutes, but it was David Heyman as a producer, and whoever the directors were given license to do whatever they wanted with him. So we got to make a lot of stuff up. And I had come up with the hair and the clothes and the voice and the cane and all that stuff, mostly because the cast was peopled with the greatest living actors in the English language. And I was very intimidated, particularly to try and be sinister with Alan Rickman already in the film, who defines sinister. So I wanted help from every single department I could get. If I could have had a whirring battle blade or, a flock of bats over my head, I would have done it, and stutter and a parrot. But there was a scene where Lucius Malfoy was appealing to the public for any information about the missing boys. It was in the fourth one, Goblet of Fire. Harry's gone missing, and Cedric Diggory, Robert Pattinson's gone missing. Something you would see in the Daily Prophet, but moving. It would be a scene, the equivalent of a PSA, public service announcement. Lucius sitting in front of his fire with my 2 dogs, which were never in any other film scenes, recording this appeal to go in the Daily Prophet, which you would see it come to life in the Daily Prophet. And I'm pretty sure I got a bunch of the Whitney Houston lyrics in there. Children are our future. We need to treat them well. All that. And the crew was shaking with laughter. And David called me from the edit. He went, "Jace, your scene with the dogs, mate, it's just ace. Everybody, we put it in the preview screenings, people are pissing themselves laughing, and they're just big spontaneous rounds of applause." And I went, "Oh, that's so great." He went, "So it's got to go." I went, "What?" He went, "They're watching a film. They're meant to be worried about where Cedric and Harry are, and all they're thinking is, that guy's funny, isn't he?" Because it's really not appropriate. It killed me to be told you've got to go because you're getting peals of laughter and rounds of applause. Very upsetting.
Has the scene ever been released?
No. I've got a still of it.
Okay, that's awesome.
Well, I'll tell you what else wasn't released, actually.
Yeah.
There's a fight in the Vale room between me and Gary Oldman, me and Sirius Black. And Gary Oldman, for my generation, was Brando. He was the great chameleon for Prick Up Your Ears and Sid and Nancy and a whole bunch of other films. So the fact that I got to work with him and call him a colleague was very special. I didn't get over fangirling for months and months and months. But eventually, I'm working with Gary. And had I imagined that I might ever work with him, it wouldn't be pointing wands at each other, coming up with some versions of spells. But David left us with the second unit director. He said, "Come up with a great fight." And he'd pop back in occasionally. And Gary go, "How about I point my wand down at the ground and like the rock turns into waves, like waves around, and knocks you over?" And they go, "Yeah, we can do that. We can do that for a bit." And I go, "How about this? I take my wand and I stroke it up and down the cane, and I send a double bolt out, one out of the cane, one out of the wand, and it spins around like a helix, like a green helix, and kind of traps you a bit." And they go, "Yeah, we can do that." I remember David was in there one day. Gary goes, "How about I throw my wand like a boomerang, spins around, and then it goes and lands right in his chest, and his chest like turns all green and pussy and falls out." And David goes, "It's a kid's film, Gary." But nonetheless, he and I had a very good time coming up with all kinds of fighting stuff. And then a year later, whenever it is I went in to put the voice on and do ADR, it's all gone. There's a fight. He lifts a wand. I'm knocked off the cliff. And I said to David, what happened to? I thought we shot amazing fight for weeks. He said, "No, it was amazing. It was fantastic." He goes, "If I was making a film called Lucius versus Sirius, I have a whole third act. Unfortunately, there's another fight afterwards. It's meant to be more important, and it was very boring compared to yours. So I cut it."
You got to be with Gary Oldman and have that cool part of the fight, and
exactly.
It didn't all make it. Well, so if podcast listeners are wondering, why is Jason being so generous with his time? He's been in the podcast before. You were in for your excellent performance in 2021, the film Mass, the Sundance movie. That was the last time I think we did a podcast together. We're going to get into...
But wait, we've got to the period of time now, 2004 or 5, when we first encountered each other.
That's right. So I saw this amazing movie that everybody should reach out and go see if they haven't, which is 9 Lives by Rodrigo Garcia from 2005. It's an anthology film, and it's incredible. And you have just a great scene with Robin Wright right at the beginning. It's just like 2 past lovers run into each other at a grocery store. Simple idea.
So beautifully done. She's so fantastic.
Much is conveyed.
The writing is so great.
So much is conveyed. It was just awesome. And, I started my screening series in Los Angeles in 2003. We would do Q&As in 2005. I was one of the first podcasters out there when podcasting basically launched. And I was lucky enough to have 9 Lives in my screening series and in the podcast that year. And in Sundance 2006, it's weird to be a journalist and how you work with publicists. And I never thought this would happen. But basically, there was a house of publicists getting together at Sundance. Everything I was trying to do for staying kept falling through. I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to go. My first Sundance was 2003. And I believe it was Julie Siegel said, "Hey, we're doing a house." She's like, "Good news, we could take you. Bad news, you don't have a room. You have to figure out an inflatable bed and sleep on the floor, and you can
All
share
right.
one of the public bathrooms. I'm like,
One of the great Sundance experiences.
yeah, I'm like, you know what? Why not? That's what Sundance is about. I think that one of the years I was in a room with 10 people and I was sleeping in the sleeping bag on the floor.
Same as the Edinburgh Festival for me. Yeah, I
Yeah.
remember
So
that all the
I
time.
was at a point in my life, it was just a blast. So we get there and it's like you get there the night before the festival starts. So you could make it to that 8:30, 9 o'clock movie the next morning. And Jason just walks into the house. You had gone to the grocery store. You come in with, I believe, some beer and you basically said you were going to make us pub food. And
Right.
there were just groceries. And I don't know what the hell it was you made, but like it was fantastic.
I'm amazed that you remember any of that. I remember sharing with you. My friend Diana was one of the people in the house who used to produce the Spirit Awards. And yeah, we shared a house. It was great. I prefer those experiences, those early experiences when we were all sharing things and nobody had a penny and stuff. And I was there with a film that didn't cost anything and felt very amateur in a lovely way.
I could spot a writer across a room, but for some reason, I have a blind spot sometimes for actors or just
Right.
anyone in general, by the way, even like friends. It didn't dawn on me that you were Jason Isaacs, who I'd already seen and talked about at length in Nine Lives. And yes, Harry Potter too. But like it didn't dawn on me until like maybe we were cleaning up from
Right.
the pub food because you were just so down to earth and normal. And you started asking me these questions about podcasting because you heard me talking about it with one of the publicists. And I just looked at you and I was like, am I going to get myself in trouble? I'm like, it's funny. You, in a weird way, are in the podcast. You're like, what are you talking about? And basically, I explained that there was this episode that I had done that year with Garcia. And basically, you're like, oh, I'll have to give it a listen. Now, usually when people say that, I expect I'm never going to hear another word back. But podcasting was new enough. And within a day of us just kind of intersecting in that house at different times, I remember one thing was you were leaving early in the morning. You're like, hey, I got to wake you up for a second. I'm like, okay, what's going on? Everything okay? And you're like, I started listening to that podcast. I'm obsessed. He's like, I'm so glad you love that movie. I'm so glad Rodrigo wanted to talk in depth about that movie. You're like, we got to keep in touch. I'm like, absolutely, man. I'm like, one day you'll be in the podcast. Here we are.
Sure, here we are. And I subscribed.
20
I
years
think I
later.
might have been, that was the first podcast I subscribed to.
I got to say, like, this is the thing that I think has always made you unique as an actor. And I'm sure anyone that has listened this far to this conversation realizes you don't just show up and do your lines. You really have a feel for story and character, especially based on what you just told us about the Patriot and everything else. You're not just.
By the way, I don't always do that. I mean, if I'm invited to do that, I do that. Like, but I didn't do it in Angels in America. You didn't need to. It was perfect. But when someone asks, if I've got an opinion, that they're opening a door, be careful who walks through. I'm happy often to. I did The West Wing. You didn't change a semicolon to an ellipsis in The West Wing. But film, I always think the script is a blueprint. I did a Harold Pinter play at one point. Harold was a very complicated man, an extraordinary genius, obviously a man of letters, and who won the Nobel Prize for Literature and everything. And one time we were out at dinner, and I said, Harold, I flipped a sentence at the matinee today. I said the second half at the beginning and the beginning at the end, and he got a huge laugh. I tried it again this evening. It got the same laugh. Do you mind if I do that there? And he went, I've got a fucking Nobel Prize. What have you got? And I went, nothing. Sorry, shouldn't have mentioned it. So I don't always do it, but when invited, I do.
That's funny. I mean, look, I had a lot of great experiences at Sundance. I heard people talking about the grand jury prize winner the night before, and they saw that I was standing there and saw my press credentials. I never spilled the beans. I'm a good journalist. I know how to see.
I'll tell you what I remember about that Sundance. I was there for a film which cost very little, made very little. And, I've been there a million times now with films which cost nothing, never came out, but I loved making. But that year, everything was free. Like the whole of Park City Main Street was turned into these gifting rooms where they just gave stuff to actors. And it was ironic because you were there in a tiny film, you got paid nothing to make that you were never going to make any money from. I left, I think I went to Walmart to get an extra suitcase. I left weighed down with all kinds of, pasta makers I didn't need or whatever. But there was Motorola was there giving out flip phones, which is huge. And by the lifts at Sundance, there was a place that gave away washers and dryers. God only knows why, but they were gifting washers and dryers to people and delivering them. And I had just moved into an apartment in Los Angeles, I think, for a few months, and it was unfurnished. And I had like an air mattress and stuff like that. And a wash dryer would have been amazing. So I went up to someone said, it's by the lift. So I went up to the lift. And there was Robert Downey Jr., freshly out of prison. And we had a mutual friend, Mike Figgis. So I saw him and he made eye contact with me. And I mean, he doesn't know who I am, but I knew who he was. And I said, hey, man, how you doing? I'm a friend of Mike Figgis's. Nice to meet you. And he goes, oh, hey, how's Mike doing? Good. And he goes, can you believe people are coming in here to try and score fucking washers and dryers? Man, how sick is that? Ridiculous, right? It's obscene. And I went, yeah, isn't it? He goes, sign the charity wall, but like take a washer and dryer at a fucking independent movie festival? Seriously? And I went, yeah, I know. People. And I left without one. I'm still bitter. 25 years on, whatever it is.
I knew journalists that would get into those gifting rooms and they wouldn't go see movies and report on them, and they brought extra suitcases, just like you said.
Sure.
I never got
That's all gone now. You occasionally get a battery charger. But I do remember seeing studio heads and giant CIA agents outside a shop they weren't allowed in that was giving duffel coats or boots or whatever. Like homicidal with rage. They couldn't get in. I fucking paid for this movie. And you're like, you run a studio. You can afford a free coat. Yeah. It really, you probably shouldn't get this angry.
I got a good scarf and a hat, I think. Those were the giveaways that really were important because it's cold at Sundance. Now,
I got false expectations. I've been in a number of films where the Eccles Theatre is a 3,000 seat theatre at Sundance.
Hold on. No misinformation here, sir.
I'm so sorry.
It's 1,200. It's 1,200.
Feels like 3,000.
It does.
1,200 people. And when you're in a film that gets like a standing ovation and you can hear people laugh, hear people crying, they stand and they cheer and you go, this one's going to hit. You go, any sniffs? And no one buys it and it never comes out. And it's on Lifetime at 4 o'clock in the morning and you go, but those people loved it in the Eccles. It's a strange feeling. I've now obviously got used to it.
But sometimes marketing is just off and it can't compete. I mean, again, like not to over promote it, but Mass, I think I saw Mass at the Library Theater, which is 400 seats. There was not a dry eye in the house.
No, it's a stunning film.
It is a great film, but it was made on such a small budget that there was not the marketing dollars behind it. And it was coming out during the end of lockdowns. And so I still think there's Sundance movies that are worth discovering.
It is marketing, partly, and the muscle and money behind it. But Mass was distributed by Bleecker Street, by a lovely man called Andrew, who was so passionate about it. He was prepared to lose money, lose all kinds of money to make sure many people saw it. And he got on a Zoom with all of us, the cast and with Fran, and begged us to change the title. I mean, I say begged us, he's begging Fran, but Fran is such a lovely man, such a collaborator. He was so new to it all. He went, let's get all the cast involved. Yeah. And everybody said, Fran said, it has to be Mass. It means 20 different things. And Andrew went, look, I want people to see the film. They think it's heavy, literally Mass. They think it's religious, which puts them off. They think it's about mass shooting. It's not. It's about the power of forgiveness. It's an uplifting, spiritually valuable film. It's a beautiful film about, how carrying hatred will only poison you and you need to learn to love. Like, it's so important. And the title will put people off. And they all went, we're right behind Fran. And I went, I'm not. I'm with Andrew. I think we should change it to whatever the hell, change it to Space Dogs Go Loopy, whatever it is. It gets people in the cinema. They're going to have that experience in there. And when we all got off the thing, they were like, you backstabber. I'm like, I'm sorry. I love you all. But I think he's right. You've got to get people in the room first before they can have that experience.
Do you remember another title?
No, there were a couple I liked. Otherwise, you can't go, you can't just be negative and go, this is no good. There were a couple that were fine. Now it feels like it could only ever be Mass. And it had only ever been Mass when he wrote it. But you're right. I wish more people had seen it, not because I want the glory from it or something, just because it won the Robert Altman Award at the Spirits. Like, it's a special film. People who saw it were affected by it.
I hope people continue to discover it. Now, one of my favorite moments at Sundance that actually leads to you indirectly was 2011. I saw this great film called Another Earth. I'm blown away by it. I'm running up because the script is so good to talk to these filmmakers to see how they did a serious sci-fi film like a Twilight Zone on, just
nothing.
A couple hundred
pennies.
Grand, if that. Yeah. They were talking in their Q&A about getting a laptop from Apple to edit on and returning it on the 13th day to get their money back, and then buying another one again and returning it on the 13th day.
Genius.
To get like a first cut done. That's how little money that they had. Don't do that at home, kids. I'm not telling you to do that. But obviously I'm talking about Britt Marling and Mike Cahill.
And Zelbat Manglish.
And then in the same Sundance, and this is the craziest thing, the same year, 2011, Sound of My Voice was also there with Zal Batmanlige, who directed it and co-wrote it, and Britt, again, co-wrote and starred in it. And I'm like, who are these people? Like, nobody just...
It was a launch par excellence.
Like, literally, they debuted with 2 movies at Sundance. I walked up to them. I'm like, I want to interview you when we get back to LA. Should I call an agent or publicist? And they're like, what are you talking about? They're like, I'll just give you my number. I don't have an agent. Right. And Britt went on to explain. She's like, the reason I co-wrote these movies and starred in them is because I don't have an agent. Or I don't have an agent that's getting me work. And I think Britt's story is one of the most inspirational because she was at a place in her career where she was not being given roles that she liked. And she collaborated with these 2 really talented writer-directors and co-wrote roles that she inhabited that were fantastic, and then went on to have these really fruitful, creative relationships. I love Britt Marling. I love
you.
Sal.
Need to tell her great story. You need to back up and put it in context, which is that she went to Georgetown University to study economics. She became very friendly with both of them. Zal became her best friend. Zal is gay, and Mike is straight, and she went out with Mike. So she had these 2 would-be directors there, and she won the lottery. I mean, her parents parents couldn't be more thrilled. She finished her degree and she said, I have got myself a place as a financial analyst at Goldman Sachs. That is the peak of the mountain of what she was aiming at. She said, the thing is, I'd really like to go to Hollywood and try and be an actress. Which is what every parent wants to hear. And she went to Hollywood and it didn't work. She could, people didn't appreciate her or get who she was and how amazing she is. And then so she sat, they huddled up, her and Mike and her and Zal. I think they might have got, Sid Field screenwriting book. I might be making that up. I don't know. And like you say, they wrote, scraped together budget, made 2 films. They both got into Sundance. She went from I Can't Get a Walk On to I Am the It Girl, which she has remained because she's a genius. She's an incredibly special artist and person in so many ways.
And I love everything about her. And then obviously that brings us right to the OA, which you were in. That's Brit and Zal right there.
That's Brit and Zal, by the way, still making essentially independent films about spirituality just on a gigantic Netflix budget, which is why it became so popular all over the world. People went, I've never seen anything like this before in my life.
It's insane, but in all the right ways. And of course, one of the most insane things is we've been robbed of a season 3.
Well, first of all, it's not over. It ain't over. It's over. Those people who've seen it and seen the end of season 2 know that we could pick that up whenever and wherever we like.
You could pick it up. You have an amazing line at the end of season 2 that
we talk all the time. I was with them 2 weeks ago. We were talking about what we would do and where we would do it and how we would do it. One of the reasons it's so original and smacks so much of their voice is that it was written on spec. So there was no development. They went in, had all the first 8 episodes written of the season 1, and many people wanted to make it because how could you not read that and think it's brilliant? Netflix did, and they left them alone. The end of season 1 was so powerful, so extraordinarily emotional and spiritual and indescribable that even I, who's in it, who's read it, it was like a religious experience. It was a strange experience. And I wrote this madly gushing email to them. You've just changed everything in the world. And then I went to sleep for the hour and a half and I woke up and I thought, oh God, what did I write? That's so embarrassing. And I looked at it and thought, I still think it's true. And I've met thousands, maybe tens of thousands of people all over the world for whom that's true. So when they sent me the second season and I read it and I got to the last bit, I phoned and I said, Zal, look, I love you. I think you and Brit are brilliant. With respect, you've jumped the shark. What you put at the end of season 2 is so ridiculous and laughable. It's, and he went, let's go for dinner, he said, and I'll explain. And we went for dinner in a restaurant. And I remember 2 minutes in, me having to walk outside in the street. The restaurant was too small and going, oh my God. And I went back in. I went, I'm so sorry. I'll never doubt you again. You're a genius. You together are a single entity of double geniuses, whatever. It's going to be amazing. So they have somewhere they want to go with it. And I have somewhere I want to go with it, with them, which is basically anywhere they go. And we are still trying to find ways to make that happen. So don't despair.
I hope you do. We are not going to talk about what is said at the end of season 2. That would be a spoiler. I encourage
I'll tell you this, people come up to me all the time, all over the world, if they recognize me, to come and say, I liked you in this, or I like this show. There's a couple of things that people come up and talk about how it changed them or how it made them feel, how it affected them. One is Harry Potter. They don't want to say, oh, weren't you fabulous? They want to talk about its profound effect on them in their lives. And the OA does the same. People come up and they don't want to say, it was great, I loved it, like one of their favorite things. They want to come up and talk about what it made them feel and how it changed them. We can't possibly leave that there.
I hope it finds a home, even if it has to go to another studio and there's a buyout.
Oh, sure.
It's worth it. And that's great to know that even back then, they know where things are going with that end of the season 2 reveal. Because
they're 2 of the smartest people I've ever met.
Yeah. I mean, I've asked them, they've even told me that if they can't get it made, one day they might even consider it as a novel or a graphic novel or something like that. They're like, one day we'll make that story get out there into the world no matter what.
Yeah, we're making it.
People coming up to you and talking about your roles, we're going to get to White Lotus. That is a heck of a character journey for you. And I think that's one that you're going to see a lot of people coming up and talking to you about in years to come because of where that character has to go. We're going to get there in a second. The last non-White Lotus question that I have is, I know that you have directed television once. Is that something that you want to do more of?
You've heard me talk, as we've been talking about, the things where people have invited collaboration. And most of my close friends are writers and directors I've worked with in the past. And some actors, but often not. When I'm allowed that level of input, or when I've been an executive producer on things, so I've actually written a lot, but uncredited, and not essentially directed, but got to be in the cut or got to suggest things. That's enough for me. I'm pretty lazy. Directing is exhausting. I like acting. I directed and acted when I did it on television, and I didn't think that's right to do that too much. I've been offered films to direct a few times. The world doesn't make any sense at all that someone would offer me, who's not directed a film, all that money to direct a film, and not offer someone who had made a successful first film. It's easier for an actor to do than for someone to make their second film, even if the first film went quite well. Which makes no sense, but I guess there's something in the novelty of it, or they think I can attract other casts or something. I only want to do it if I can do it well, and I only want to do it if I'm in love with it, because I've been in lots of films I've absolutely loved making that don't come out, or open on a Friday and close on a Monday. And it's been 2 years of someone's life. I can throw myself into something for 2 months or 5 months or 6 months, fully lose myself in it, try and stay a family member as best as possible, and then come back into my world. You lose yourself when you make a film, and it's everything to you, and it crushes you when it doesn't make money. The independent film world is a very tough one for anyone to even break even, let alone make a profit. And I don't want to go to my friends and ask them for money. I mean, I don't know everyone in the film business, but some people I will go to try and help me make it, unless I thought as much as possible that it would do well commercially, whether or not I was attached to it or not. My point is, I don't want a favor of anybody. I don't think they would give me a favor. These amounts of money are too large. And I'm too lazy to write it. You have to write it if you want to direct your first film. No one's going to offer me a brilliant script, because the brilliant scripts they could go and get well-known directors for. So the things I get offered, I go, I see why no one else wants to do it. So if a brilliant script came my way that I thought I have something to offer to this story, I think I can work with actors well. I think I can work with crew well and stuff. But there needs to be something I can bring to it that I don't think anyone else could, or else I'll let other people do who went to film school and who are desperate for the work, because I get work as an actor all the time.
But what about writing? I mean, you have a great sense of story. Have you ever considered writing a script?
I do love writing, and I write a lot, and I give a lot of notes to my friends, and I write a lot of scenes that get shot if I'm allowed to or if I'm involved, and I don't take a credit because I'm too lazy to sit with a blank screen. I'm not lazy. Maybe I'm ADHD or unfocused, or I'm too much of a procrastinator. I love tennis too much, or whatever it is. I love the fridge too much. I admire writers so much, not necessarily for the things that they write, although that too, but for the fact that they sit down and they don't do all the billion other things that call to me deafeningly when I sit down to write, like to go through and match the odd socks in my drawer, or to go and get that thing that unscrews the wheel if you get a flat, you don't need the special bolt, like any old stupid shit. I'm drawn away from the keyboard. Never say never. I haven't done it yet, and it doesn't bother me that much that I haven't. I like working with actors a lot. I do it anyway. On White Lotus we'll get to, I spoke to the young actors a lot about the scenes. I love talking about scenes with people and choices that may not have occurred to people and stuff.
Ooh, hey, I'm jumping in really quick to remind you to check out Backstory Magazine. We just published our new issue. It's our summer issue. It's our Emmy contenders issue. It's issue 56, darn it, and it's our 13th year of publishing, and I couldn't have done it without you. Heck, it's my 20th year of podcast, and I certainly couldn't have done that without you. So thanks a lot for all your support. If you've never read Backstory before, you could test drive us by reading us on a desktop or laptop at backstory.net, or you could read us in our iPad app, Backstory. There's a free issue to be found on both. So look, it would really mean a lot to me to have my podcast listeners and Apple Podcasts and Spotify and my YouTube watchers of the Backstory Magazine YouTube page, which is where you could see all these Zoomcasts. That's right, you could see us talking. It would really mean a lot to me to have you support my passion project and support independent entertainment journalism. So thanks for considering becoming a subscriber. But now, without any further ado, let's jump right into our interview with actor Jason Isaacs about his performance in White Lotus Season 3, which is Emmy eligible. Well, if this isn't a baseline, I don't know how we're ever going to give our listeners one. It is definitely time to get to White Lotus. Let's get right into it. How did you get the job? I know it's the most boring question ever.
Well, let me give you the most boring answer. I haven't auditioned for decades. It's humbling and appropriate. Mike didn't know what I would be like, and he wanted to see. And they sent me 2 pages. Just, this guy's a rich Southern guy, and don't worry about the accent. I thought I'd better worry about the accent. And there's great irony of it happening. I was in New York, so I had to go to the casting director's office in New York, and I was there to promote Archie, which is a 4-part series in which I played Cary Grant, the biggest star in the world. I was there doing publicity all day, every day, which always makes you feel a little bit more famous than you actually are. And I had to walk to the casting director's office through Times Square, where they had like 6 billboards with Archie on it. My face was hundreds of feet high, and then just behind Times Square is this room that I went to, and I turned into a bumbling, nervous idiot mess like I always was when I auditioned, who talks too much, too long, too loud, too fast. Did my audition. Can I do it again? Can I do it again? If you want to have a chat about it, speak to Dave Bernard, who's the producer, has a lot of creative input. And really, Mike doesn't like to deal with people at the audition stage. And getting to know Mike later, I realized he doesn't want to let people down. He's very sensitive, Mike, and he just didn't want to be the person who sees someone and then says no to them. He'd feel bad. He was very helpful and said this thing to me to try and make me feel good about myself, which made me feel 1,000 times worse. He went, listen, you're the only person auditioning, so, don't feel worried. And made me think, I can only fuck this up. Turns out later, that's not true. They'd offered the part to someone else who turned it down already, but thank God bless him. So I went in, I auditioned, and I didn't hear, and then I heard Mike sent me the scripts and said, we'd love you to do it, and I read them, and they were fab, and he did that thing that writers do normally when they're 5 minutes into a career, and he went, you hate it, that's okay, it's fine, if you don't want to do it, I get it, it's perfectly fine. I went, I've had the scripts for 4 hours, I'm working, I'm filming something. Anyway, I did write and say, I think it's amazing, I'd love to do it. And he goes, do you have any ideas? like the most talented people in the world. He's completely collaborative. And I said, well, look, you've just met me, but like I say, that's Pandora's box. But I did have ideas for it, and he was incredibly open to changing things to make them, to either fit me or fit what he thought was better. I follow the good writing. So, I mean, I went and did this little film. I don't know if you saw it. It was at the Berlin Film Festival called Honey Bunch. I thought Honey Bunch is a beautiful film. And, I don't have the main part or anything like it. And there wasn't any money, and I lived it wasn't glamorous. And I don't know, I hope it gets bought and seen by lots of people because I thought it was really gorgeous. But I remember the agents going, are you sure you want to do this? And I go, yeah. Have you read it? It's always the writing. With Mike, it's the writing. And it so happens it's a big TV show, but if he was doing it as dinner theatre, I would have wanted to do it. Some part of it's vanity, as well as just admiring good writing and thinking good stories should be put in the world. You look better as an actor when someone has written three-dimensional human characters that have, and in this case, with an extraordinary journey.
I love Mike White. Can't say enough things about him, but I just want to go back for 1 second logistically. So he's not in the audition. So was it the casting?
No one was in the audition. I mean, so the casting director was in the audition.
But
me and the casting director. In fact, the casting director.
The director's not in an audition, especially for someone of your stature who doesn't often audition, being called in like that. Is that
the whole thing? Was bizarre for me. Not that I think it's wrong. I mean, look, everybody is self-taped nowadays. Almost no one meets. I am at a stage where people do offer me work a lot. But of course, the work that they offer me is the work they've seen me do before.
Right.
If I want to persuade someone that I can do something they've not seen me before and they don't have faith in my ability to transform, maybe I've got to go and show them. And I think that's perfectly reasonable. There's a lot of young directors who may never have seen anything I've ever done. If I want to play two-dimensional bad guys the rest of my life, I could just, work 365 days a year. I don't. I didn't mind auditioning. If you want someone to be on your basketball team, it doesn't matter how good they look in, the shorts. You want to see them put the ball in the hoop. So I don't mind. There is a thing, having produced a few times as well, that there are some people who audition very well and then fall apart on set. Some people who can't audition to save their life and are brilliant. And that's the process he did, and whatever, it worked for me. So I'm happy with it.
Makes sense. Well, podcast listeners and Apple Podcasts and Spotify and YouTube watchers of the Backstory Magazine YouTube page, which is where you could see all these interviews. You could see us talking on Zoom. You could see out of focus pictures behind Jason. Because
Cary Grant and Randolph Scott was a gift to me at the Wrap. One of my oldest best friends made for me a montage, or just above it that you can't see, luckily, of every part. When I was turning 60, of 60 parts I played. Very nice of her. I don't know why she thought I would want pictures of myself on the wall. That's not really something I want.
Well, they're blurred. We can't see them. I'm glad you told us.
That's Chris Stapleton's album there, nice. Traveller, which was given to me, and that's North by Northwest DVD. Oh, no, soundtrack. Actually, Chris was given to me on the Kelly Clarkson show, which she gave me a piece of vinyl, which I thought was a lovely gift.
Always go vinyl when you can. Nonetheless, if you have not yet watched White Lotus Season 3, press pause, go to HBO Max, watch White Lotus Season 3. It's sitting there waiting for you. And then come back, because we're going to get into the spoilers. The easiest place to start, I'd heard Mike White say that he was originally inspired by a story of an aristocrat who had spent all of his family's money, and then he was embarrassed about it and either attempted to kill the family or did kill the family. That part of it I'm actually forgetting. But that was one of the initial things that sparked your character, Tim, on White Lotus. Mm-hmm. What could you tell us about your interpretation when you were first breaking down the script and what it meant to you?
I was worried, to be honest. I knew someone else would turn the part down, and I knew why when I read it. The guy, first of all, for many episodes, is completely out of it. He's chugging his wife's lorazepam, and he's, can barely speak, and can barely function. And I thought, how am I going to share with the audience? How's the audience going to get access to catastrophe of my mind? What he's going through, all the terror he's going through. This is what a very rich, powerful man is. What Tom Wolfe called in Bonfire of the Vanities, the big swinging dick of Wall Street. Well, this guy's a big swinging dick of Durham, North Carolina. It's legacy wealth. His grandfather was governor. His great-grandfather was probably governor. He could probably trace himself back to the Mayflower. There's probably statues to his relatives everywhere. He's had nothing but power, privilege, and status for all of his life and generations before him. And he's facing complete catastrophe, the abyss. I knew what would be going on in his head. At first, how to solve it. These people, they throw money at it. They throw lawyers at it. It's never really going to catch you. And when it became apparent there is no way out and absolute poverty and devastation is coming, how to stop thinking about it and what he can do. And the answer is simple, which is just die. Robert Maxwell was a mogul I thought about a lot, who threw himself off a boat because he was a mogul like Rupert Murdoch. And when his yacht was going to come into land, instead of all the honors he'd got in every country in the world, and he was going to be exposed as a common criminal. He'd stolen the pension funds of the companies he bought. So he threw himself into the ocean. And I thought, I was worried about two things. One is how to be out of it for that long and still active and have the audience share my anxiety. By the way, as a corollary to that, to play all these scenes and not connect with another human being. acting is connection. And I knew that he wouldn't have any. For numbers of episodes, I wouldn't be listening to the other actors. He's not listening to them. He's obsessed with or experiencing the magic mix, the blender of his own catastrophe and apocalypse. So there's how to be out of it, but not have many words, how not to connect. And then I knew what I had to get to by the end.
For a show that is so focused on sex, it's interesting that Tim and Victoria are not in any way intimate.
That's interesting, but you said that it's so focused on sex. Season 2 was very much about sex and the various different things. But in this one, there's the 3 women are thinking about sex, I think. But
so are the brothers. So are the
oh yeah,
sugar
that's true.
babies.
Yeah,
I mean,
you're right. It's just not my storyline. You're right.
It's not your storyline.
I don't think he's been having sex.
You and Mike ever talked about that? The no intimacy between the husband and wife.
I mean, it's impossible to be present with Victoria the way she is without judging her harshly. The family all think she's off the deep end, and he looks at her in despair. Well, you're asking me what I thought as Tim. He's in utter despair. She's a shadow of the girl that he married. She's nothing. She's obsessed with status and who she's above and who she's better than. And it rankles with him. He, at least the power comes not only from his name and his generational wealth, but his achievements in the world. He's an alpha male out there. She is just wanting to be better, and it's ugly. It's, and it's unkind, and he sees it for what it is. And she says awful things, and there are awkward silences, and the family just move on and pretend she didn't speak. I don't know how attractive he finds her now. I don't think they've had sex for a good while. I don't think he's unfaithful. And I think he's disappointed by all of his children in different ways. And it's so rich with dramatic ironies that Mike gives me. The one he's most disappointed by when he gets there, Lachlan, is the one he most admires by the time he gets to the end and says, could you survive without money? And he recognizes that, in fact, that's the one child that could. But his son, Saxon, who looks like a chip off the old block, actually is around trying to, fuck everything, roadkill, in street signs, anything. Failing, actually. I thought Patrick played that so beautifully that it wasn't until episode 7 when he comes begging me to succeed and to tell them what the secret is, because he's nothing without me. Do you realize that all of his advances to women end in disaster? People see right through him. He's trying to compensate for his actual lack of power and agency in his life by scoring left, right, and center and painting this bizarro world picture of what a man should be for himself, to himself, and to his younger brother.
We see his descent, right? It's first the stress. It's then the slight relief that the phones are gone and he's going to be able to hide his secret. So it's one of those classic characters that has a secret. The audience knows what it is. Everyone around him does not. Mm-hmm. And he's just destined to try and hide it as long as he can. But he doesn't really have an end game. We're not really sure how he's going to get out of it.
Well, so that's my job.
That's where we go next.
My job inside my head was he's a man full of solutions. He's blazes a trail in the finance industry and in whatever else he does. So there is a solution. He's tried a couple of them. He hasn't thought of it yet. When he gives the phones away, first of all, that's okay. The lawyer's going to fix it. The lawyer always fixes it. It might cost him a ton. Jesus, he might not even be able to work in finance again, but he'll still be rich as shit, making him do something else, maybe. There's some shame involved, but other people have done financial frauds, and it is a shame, and he will have shame. But then the last phone call with the lawyer, when I get it back, which tells me there is no hope in that direction and that I'm going to go to prison. The family will have no money and there's no way out of this. I blow up at the lawyer. That's when I cut off, and he does have end games. He's running through every possible scenario in his head and none of them quite get to the last word. There is no, whichever direction he goes in this maze, it ends up in a fiery pit of hell. And so then he steals a gun. And when he first steals a gun, it's when he first gets the news, but he gets permission to kill himself and gets the sense that it would be the right thing to do and a good thing to do after he goes to see the monk.
We'll get to that in a moment. You touched on it earlier about the kind of sense of being distraught with his children and feeling like they failed him, which putting that out as a parent sets the kids up in their own way to never be correct in his eyes either. So it's a very toxic loop. What were some of the things that you discussed with Mike and some of the actors about how to play that, in which on the surface...
Well, Mike doesn't like to talk about that stuff. Mike will talk about anything if you ask. It's on the page as far as he's concerned, and you can fill in all the gaps. And if you're doing something on camera he likes, he doesn't want to discuss it. He will, but we didn't feel the need. I spent a lot of time with Patrick and Sam and Sarah Catherine playing my kids. They really looked after me, actually. My wife didn't arrive for the first month and a bit, and we were all in these, or the grown-ups, or the older actors, were all in these gigantic villas with full-size swimming pools and a butler and stuff, which sounds great. It's actually really lonely. The women were all together, and they got to do Pilates and whatever they did together, but I wasn't sharing. Walton was in a side villa, but he kept himself to himself, and he was working himself into character. He has a very interesting approach to work that I don't have. And I was alone, and Patrick, Sam, and Sarah Catherine adopted me, and they came and looked after me, and I really learned to love them. I adore them in real life, and I love them as their dad. And we didn't discuss much because, the things that the story conveys are all there to read between the lines. It's pretty apparent. We didn't discuss it with Mike. We discussed it with each other at great length. We built up life stories and backstories for ourselves, and they built with each other too. And Mike's writing, although it's really economic, he might only write 3% of the iceberg that sticks out. But you don't have to think too hard to work out what the other 97% must be. That's the brilliance of his writing, his economic kind of homeopathic droplets of truth and nuance, which tell you the whole story. And so, we discussed with each other a lot, me and the kids, but not with Mike. And not with Parker, actually.
Not with Parker.
She literally wasn't socializing with us. This is a bigger stage. She was in another house with other people. Her character's so out of it. She wasn't out of it, Parker, obviously, but her character, she's so out. Victoria is so on another plane, and the family thinks she's bonkers and don't really engage. The kids don't go to her for advice or anything. They think their mum's a pill addict, pill popper. Yeah, we talked with each other about what the scenes meant and what they meant to us, and arguments we had at home, and the fact that they would have come to their dad with problems and things to discuss and not to their mum.
Tim is a very isolated character. What about the times when you run into the other characters? You're still self-medicating when you run into Gary/Greg or into Rick, some of the other characters as well. What was that like for you? Because you're really aloof, and you're on drugs, and you're high as a kite, and you're trying to get into another plane of existence through drugs.
What I'm trying to do is get as close to coma as possible. I'm trying to shut down my brain. It takes a humongous effort to have a conversation with anyone about anything. I'm seeing it through a kind of swirling mist of just a horror show. Talk about Event Horizon. He's gone to hell and back 1,000 times a second, Tim, in every encounter with everyone he knows, with his family, with the press, with, what it's going to be like in prison, and what are they going to do to pay their phone bill? He's going to have food 3 times a day in prison, at least they're not. What's it like engaging with them? I'm not really engaging with them. That was one of the frustrating or worrying things going in, thinking, is this going to work at all for an audience? How do I make it seem like there's a human being here? Because
it's the classic question of a performance. How do you make the internal external?
Or how do you keep it internal but share it?
Right.
I mean, he doesn't make it external. He gets angry at Walton because he'd like to be angry at something. He'd really like to punch something. He'd really like to be angry at something somewhere. He's an alpha guy. He wants to break something. It's not going to help, but he'd really like to. But, one of the possible solutions in the back of his head, although God knows how he's going to finance it, and maybe he could borrow money, is just to not go home. But how he does that with 3 kids and a wife, God knows. But could he disappear? Is that possible? Could you lose your identity? Could this guy be someone who's run away? Is there really people in Thailand who run away from the stuff he's running away from? Could he be that person? In the end, he decides, no, it's best to shut it all off and kill myself.
He's interacting occasionally with Gary/Greg, and that is what he's done. He
Sure.
has his new identity as Gary. He's thriving in Thailand. Now, there's no way that Tim would know that or understand that.
No, Tim doesn't know that.
Yeah,
but they do say people are either running away or I can't remember what the line is, but there are people who say to him, and that's why he asks Gary. Essentially, he's asking, is that possible? Is it possible to lose yourself? That's Mike's great writing. I'm asking someone without realizing that's exactly who I'm talking to.
It's a brilliant moment. And the U.S. does have extradition with Thailand, so
right.
It's not like...
But you've got to be able to find someone.
Right, you have to be able to find them.
And, there are authorities who can be bribed in some countries in the world. I'm not saying Thailand.
The joke of this series is, and there's no way Mike could have known this when he was writing it, but right now, if Tim was really in trouble, we know exactly where he needs to make a political donation, and he would be scot-free, no problem.
Well, so, there's always a chance he'll be pardoned, obviously, depending on who's in his address book.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's a mess. I want to talk about kind of getting into the darkest part of the show, the suicidal ideations that Tim has. And of course, I would say anybody in the United States that has suicidal ideations or has a friend that does, call 988. It's the toll-free hotline that's open 24/7. And, there is another way down that path, which is what I'm really happy Tim learns. The brilliance.
His ego takes him to suicide.
Oh, yeah. And
his ego takes him there. Something else kicks in, a love for life, something beyond his ego in the end. I have a film out in the UK at the moment, which you probably haven't seen, called The Salt Path. Hopefully it'll come to America soon. But it's about a man it's a true story of a man and a woman who lost everything. They had a business, they had a home, they had a farm and stuff, and they were conned essentially out of it, but they lost absolutely everything. And they went out homeless on the road, just walking on the coastal path. And it was interesting doing press about it because he's a man who has literally exactly identical dilemma to Tim, that he lost everything. His first thoughts were for the people left behind, and he didn't think he was better than anyone. He didn't think it was a fall from grace. But even this lovely man who I play in The Salt Path with, it's a two-handed with Gillian Anderson. They both were thrown out. And what they did was find solace and kinship with homeless people relatively quickly. I mean, he did actually, funny enough, pass through a notion of suicide at one point, but dismissed it very quickly because he couldn't do it to his children. But it wasn't because he thought he was better than people at all. It's because he felt such shame at letting his kids down. And the contrast, the reasons Tim thinks about killing himself, to me at least, were really clear. He just couldn't bear to be a loser. He'd been a winner all of his life. He'd been the provider all of his life for his family, but also in the community, at the golf club. It's telling that Mike wrote me that line, at the golf club, and I bury my head in my hands. It's that and everybody I've known. The darkest part is considering killing his wife and his children.
Of course.
Suicide, I understand. I mean, I'm embarrassed to say I understood that. I don't mean I agreed with it. I just mean that when I was being him, it felt like the right thing to do. It felt like the only option, considering who he was and what mattered to him and who he couldn't face after, who was not going to be able to face afterwards. It made sense to me. It was upsetting and terrifying to play. But when I had to look at my wife and think, you're not going to be able to cope, and the best thing to do is kill you, and then look, and then one by one add my children to that list, that felt like a much darker place.
You're absolutely right. And it absolutely is. And what's so crazy is it would have been pat. It would have been easy for Mike to have you go down a path of suicide or suicide murder, but it ends up all playing out in your mind. So as an actor, you still get to play those scenes multiple times. We see the kind of dream sequence version of them.
Well, of course, I didn't know it was a dream sequence when I first read it. And hopefully when you first see it,
of course.
I thought, oh my God, oh, I'm going to die in episode 6. Oh, no. Who knew?
It's a testament to his writing that your entire character arc is based on realizing that there's no reason his family has to suffer because of Tim's crimes. And that if he really is the alpha man that he likes to think of himself as being, taking responsibility in this Buddhist sort of way of shedding your material senses is the best path forward.
Wow, I didn't see it like that at all. How interesting that you saw that. I don't think he thinks I'm taking responsibility for it. He thinks you will all go through a terrible time now. You're going to be crushed and broken by. He thought he was saving them. They all think their life will be over if they were poor, and their old life will be over. They are going to have to face terrible things, and it's going to sit ill with them. And certainly with his wife, it's going to be possibly unbearable for her. And he thinks that's what you should go through. You need to get to the place that I'm at now. So it's not like he's taking responsibility. He's like, I'll take responsibility for my bit. You all need to come down from the Mount Olympus we've been living on. And it's going to be a bumpy ride, but it'll be best for you. They're not going to be okay, that family. It's going to be tough. Maybe impossible for his wife.
I would certainly agree with that. I mean, tell me about some of the discussions that you had with Mike about the monk scene, which you were alluding to earlier, because it really is a great scene in which you're, again, Mike's brilliance as a writer, you're taking the very highfalutin concept of what Buddhism is, and you're boiling it down to a few sentences that really Tim could understand as someone that's never...
Actually, to a visual image, almost, or a...
The visual image of the ocean, the droplets of water returning to the ocean as being a simple explanation, and one that Tim is very happy with.
The first time he hears it, he takes it as license to kill himself. He thinks, I'm frightened of it, what it mean to me, and what it'll mean is I can just let go. I can let go of all the stuff I've had to carry all my life about. You better be better than everyone else. You better be richer. You better be more powerful. They need to look up to you, and you need to be worth looking up to, and the pressure with that. And what a relief it would be just to be going back into the water. At the end of the show, when he's looking at the water again off the boat, he looks and he thinks, I'm not going to die. I'm just going to be ordinary. I'm just ocean. I'm not a droplet. I'm not above anyone. He looks over at the people he loves and he goes, neither are you. And it's going to be painful, but you're just going to be this. We're all this. And whatever happens to us, we're just this. And we can't control it. And so when he first hears the words of the monk, it's as beautiful as it seems. It's licensed to shoot himself in the head. So it's not quite as beautiful as one would think. He's very moved when he comes out. He thinks the guy's very special. He's told him something important, but it's that it's okay to go ahead and kill yourself. But when he thinks about the words of the monk at the end of the show and looks at the drops of water and knows what he's going back to, he thinks something entirely different. He thinks, I am just a member of the common humanity, and we just go where the waves are and where the ocean and fate takes us. And it's not right that we try and stay suspended above everyone as a droplet. So it means something very different.
I'm curious if there were conversations with Mike or things that ended up deleted, like scenes that that,
Oh
that
my
were there
God.
for Tim that wound up being either too extreme, too crazy, things that were just taken off the board? Because I would love to hear about that.
Every episode came in about an hour and a half, and he cut about 32 minutes out of it.
Wow.
So every episode. And so there are many scenes that everybody had. Sarah Catherine lost a whole storyline where she had sex with Zion and lost her virginity because it didn't work tonally with the end of the film. So that's not where they were all going to. And it didn't work for her either. I mean, not for Sarah Catherine, but for the character, they thought. I lost lines, I remember missing terribly. I remember two lines I loved. One was when I first arrived, and Christian, who I think is a genius, Christian Friedel, who played Fabian, the hotel manager, said, "How was your flight?" And I said, "Long layover in Doha, but hey, flew commercial, save the planet." And the idea that I wanted credit for not flying private, I thought was lovely. Now, often it was just some stupid, funny line, I thought, because I didn't get many gags. Other people got gags. What you really wanted on set was to make Mike shriek with laughter. I was a kind of plot donkey. I carried a lot of the emotional weight of the scenes. Parker, of course, would have everyone peeling, shrieking with laughter. So I wanted, again, there was one point at which she said, "Come on, we've got to go to the party." That's right. It was Patrick, I think, said, "We've got to go to the party." I'm saying Parker. And I said, I think Mike had written, "I just got to go and change my clothes." And I went and took a pill. And I said, "Can I try something silly?" And he went, "Yeah, sure." I was there and I said, "I got to go and take a really big shit." And it's so out of character for Tim to say something as vulgar as that. And she just looked utterly horrified. And Patrick looked like, "Tim, what did he just say?" No, I remember thinking that, oh, I hope that stays in. It didn't. I lost when I took the gun, quite a long sequence where I made my way back to the room with the gun, and it's because you don't want to know that he's got the gun. You shouldn't know he's got the gun until Guytok discovers he's got the gun in the closed circuit television. So all the stuff of me having the gun and hiding the gun, not knowing what to do with the gun, that was a big old sequence of shots, some night shoots and stuff, and that went.
You were talking about how everybody else was getting gags. You don't get a gag, but you do have one gag that's pretty big.
Well, actually, not as big as it could have been because it happened twice in the originals. I remember. I'm drunk and my robe falls open and the kids go, "Dad!" The scene went on and it happened again. And the second time they went, "Dad!" And it was much funnier the second time. But the second one was cut because you didn't need the extra dialogue. And that bothered me when I saw the cut because I knew the second one was a killer laugh. And you just know, when your laughs come and you know that you've lost them.
I mean, the first one with the robe falling open in front of the family and everybody freaking out was absolutely hilarious. It's
funny, but imagine it twice.
It would have been a funny gag to see again, yeah. But you're right. You don't need to do it twice, and it was smart of Mike to cut it. But of course, you had to, journalists around the world, I apologize, we're asking you these questions.
Unbelievable.
I'm apologizing for journalism too many times. You had a quote you had to walk back. Every way you handled that, I thought was very inclusive, very understanding of your cast, and the comparisons you were making, I did not think were intended in any way to be offensive, because that's what actors, male and female, go through with the concept of nudity or prosthetics. I apologize you had to go through that.
No, I didn't really mind. People were very sensitive. They went, "Are you okay?" And you really got grilled by the person. I'm like, I thought it was all fun. None of it bothered me at all. I tell you what happened, which was interesting to me, just in terms of, I've never been involved in anything that kind of went so viral. Every comment anyone made went viral, and every single, for a moment there, we felt like we were the most famous people on the planet because every raised eyebrow was on every website. Tim flashes his family. Every journalist asked me, "Are you wearing a prosthetic? Is it a prosthetic penis? How does it?" And I remembered that Theo James, who is a wonderful actor who was in season 2, all of his interviews became about the fact he wore a prosthetic penis. And I thought, I've got a lot of acting to do in this. And I know I've got some stuff coming up. It's like Greek tragedy. And I don't want to be the guy that talks about his penis the whole time. So let me kick this into touch on the day that I had 100 interviews only about that. And I said, I'm not going to talk about it. It's a show. You can come to whatever conclusion you want. I think Tim's at a very low ebb. He's having a bad time. He's drunk and he's sloppy in front of his family. And so then I did an interview with Gail King, who was delightful, by the way. He's a very good friend of Patrick's mum and came to the dressing room and hung out, where she said they were all very funny and smutty about, is it a prosthetic penis? And I thought, okay, here's a great chance, a big TV show. I'll go, I'm not sure if there's a woman on here you'll be asking about her vulva. And first of all, you want to see the floor of the TV studio when you say the word vulva on daytime television. And I said, I just don't think it's appropriate. And Mikey Madison had just won Best Actress Oscar. I couldn't remember if she was fully naked. I couldn't remember if Margaret Qualley was, but I thought, well, let's draw them in. They're two naked women. And I said, you wouldn't be asking them about their genitalia. It's just not something you would think was appropriate, And then the guy next to me, Tony, goes, yeah, but was it a prosthetic? And I said, let me just understand, Tony, because you're a serious journalist. It's very important to you to know whether you've actually seen my real penis. Is that something you're desperate to see? And with someone else, I said, should I show it you now on television? Or do you want to go into the dressing room and have a look? What is so important to you to know whether you've seen my penis or not? And I found it quite amusing. First of all, people went, oh, she gave you a very hard time on television. I went, no, she didn't. I don't care. It's the banter of interviews. It's fine. But then there were about 4 people, because you can search for yourself on X or Twitter, as those of us who refuse to be bullied like to call it. There were about 4 people who went, Mikey Madison, would never be us. Women have been naked forever on screen. They've always had to be naked and exploited and gratuitously naked. And actually, Margaret Qualley was asked about her breasts. And I went, okay, so 4 people got that. Maybe I shouldn't have mentioned those actresses. I think they're both great. Their performances are great. And actually, Margaret Qualley was asked about body double. Specifically, I'd said no one asked about their genitalia. That's what I was saying. It seemed inappropriate to me. But nonetheless, 4 people were upset. And then I saw on one of the major entertainment websites, backlash against Jason Isaacs' comment about women. And I went, is there? Oh my God, terrible. I don't mean to upset women at all. I count myself as a champion of women and against exploitation, gratuity. And so I looked it up, everyone across all social media accounts. And no, there were just the 4 or 5 people. But once it was on that one website, it was on another website. Then it was on another. And then whether or not there were fans upset by it or not, it became a received wisdom truth across multimedia websites that I had overspoken and said terrible things and not acknowledged that women had been forced to be naked forever in television and film shows. So I asked my publicist, I said, I don't want people to think that about me. Let me speak to journalists. So I spoke to a bunch of journalists. I went, listen, I shouldn't have mentioned those women. I don't need to cite those women to make the point I was making, which is I don't think it's appropriate for a grown man playing a difficult, complicated acting part to be grilled about whether journalists have actually seen my penis or not, because it's none of their business. The Brothers Hand job supplanted that as a news story and it disappeared. But what was interesting for me was that it became a reality because a journalist decided to make it a reality, although it was actually 4 people.
It's crazy. And of course you have bots that are repeating the same narrative,
sure,
like not even real users. So it's a complicated problem. And I will say for the record, interestingly, just because you mentioned the substance, they hired a really talented team of prosthetics makeup artists. They did a lot of prosthetics with Margot. Did you and Mike ever talk about a change to the ending? Was there ever going to be a version where Tim really did kill himself? Was that ever on the table even for a minute?
Not for a split second. Although what was funny is that my wife, who is a huge White Lotus fan, was aware that some days I come back covered in blood and heard, you'd hear gunshots. We were shooting at the hotels we were filming at. When it was being broadcast, which is almost a year later, she said to me, which ending has Mike used? I went, excuse me? She went, well, I know you shot multiple endings. Which endings you used? And I went, what are you talking about? She went, I know. Okay. I've talked to the other actors. I know what's going on. Just do you know which ending is used? Because we didn't shoot multiple endings. She's misheard and misinterpreted the fact we were shooting these fantasy sequences. But I think Patrick's fiance, Abby, had been in the villa next door to where they were shooting, and there's a sequence in which in the fantasy when I shoot Patrick, she thought she knew but was prepared to keep secret, keep very mum that he was going to die at the end. So when she watched it, she got an amazing shock.
And I could see how people think it's an alternate ending when it's really just a dream sequence. So that
I love the fact, by the way, if you notice there's a pattern where you keep saying, did you talk to Mike about? And the fact is that Mike was always available and as a magnificent director, I love the way he directs, but he didn't want to go deeply into anything unless the actor really wanted to go deeply into it.
Interesting.
He felt like he'd given you enough clues and it was up to you to find your own answers. And if he believed the version of your answers that appeared on camera, that was fine.
Here's a silly one for you. What do you think happens next for Tim?
Depending on who's in his phone book, does he get a pardon? I mean, people have done a lot worse. If he doesn't get a pardon, I think he goes to prison. Can he work in finance again? No, but can he advise other people on finance? Will he get his wealth back? Probably not the billions he had, but he'll know many other wealthy people. He's very good at his job. He didn't make his money by being a criminal. This was a stupid favor he did. He knows how to make money out of money, and he knows people with money. And I'm sure that not only in his own personal equity fund, funded with many other people's, they will still want his advice, how to steer money. I think he'll make his money back again if he wants to. The big question, most interesting question is this spiritual change, which is real and absolute, heralding something permanent in him? Will he be able to hold on to it? Is this a practice? Because he doesn't realize it's Buddhist. It's not like he's suddenly picked up, he's not chanting or anything, but this new sense of acceptance and surrender, can it stay with him for some kind of permanent spiritual change? And if so, will any of it rub off on his children and his wife? I don't know what's going to happen to the family. I mean, the comedy version of it is Schitt's Creek, but the non-comedy version is whatever Mike chooses to write, and by God, wouldn't I love it if he did.
That would be incredible. What could you tell us about filming with the monk? That was a great scene, and again, internal versus external. You could really see the gears behind your eyes kind of lighting up as you're getting this great explanation.
There is a thing about acting that if you ask a question, you should really want the answer. Sometimes you're acting when people ask a question and they don't want the answer. They're just saying the words, and you need to want the answer. answer. And Tim really wanted an answer, because he's playing with dying. It's the first time in 5 or 6 episodes that he's actually present and listening and connecting with someone and hanging on their every word and trying to picture and working out what that means for his life. The rest of the time, they could all just be speaking Serbo-Croat as far as he's concerned, So I thought he was great. I was surprised to find at the end that he wasn't a monk. He's a journalist with a podcast. And he went, do you think the monks would be in your show? And I went, because we're surrounded by monks. And I went, oh, yeah, probably not. We were there and for enough time off. I thought about going off on spiritual retreat, doing silent retreats and stuff. But witness the fact we've been talking for 3 hours. I'm not big on silence.
No, you're not. And that's why we love you. We talked earlier about rehearsals. How did Mike run his sets?
Didn't want him.
Not even a blocking of a scene?
No, didn't want us there for blocking, actually.
Wow.
Because the extra time that would add it together over 7 months of shooting would be another 3 weeks. And DP Ben had very specific ideas about where to shoot things from and what would look best. And you get there. And sometimes Ben would go, how about you stand here and you turn there and you say that and you say that line there. And I go, dude, I love you, but I know you want me to say that there because the setting sun is behind me. Why would I say that there? My wife said, I've got to come over and speak to her. I go, oh, all right. But Ben would fight for the most beautiful version. I would fight for the things that felt real. And Mike would fight for the combination of what told his story best. Not fight for, but that was the dance. But they would always block it before we got there. You don't want to do stuff in rehearsal. I mean, you could roughly run it through so you knew where you were going to be. You want the weird, unpredictable stumbles and magic and surprises to happen on camera because otherwise it happens in rehearsal and then you try and reproduce it, which sucks.
7 months, what were the most amount of takes that you did?
No, never that many. Because remember, I was on Peter Pan. We did 121 takes one day. I did 70 and 80 takes many times.
Wow.
So not that many, 5, 6, 7, something like that. There was never anything that technical. Mike wants the truth of the human beings. Mike wants you to surprise yourself and surprise him. Yeah, he doesn't waste time. He's practical.
7 months is a long shoot. Sometimes filmmakers could reassess what they want out of the narrative. Do you remember any major rewrite pages coming in?
He's never off, Mike. So he's up for discussion if you want to have it. And I always want to have it. And, texts would arrive in the early hours of the morning and on the Sundays or on the day off, while he's shooting someone else's scene about my scene and vice versa. It's superhuman is what he did to direct every scene. He gets a lot of credit as a writer. I'm so glad you said before he's a magnificent writer-director because he doesn't, I think, get the credit as a director because people think that directors choose what happens and then execute it. That's not what he does. He foments an attitude of creative play. He comes out, he gently offers suggestions like soap bubbles that might burst if you look at them too closely. He laughs so much and he empowers you. Comes out from behind the monitor, he goes, awesome, so good. Loved it. Let's go again. Or what about, I don't know, would there be a world where, and then offer something up very gently, like, I don't know if it's any good or not. It's gold, solid gold. And if you don't do whatever he suggests, in fact, if there's half a line reading to be dug out of his, delivery, then you should do it. But he offers it up so gently, so much as a suggestion and never a direction. And it just creates an atmosphere where everybody feels like they're walking on air and empowered to make bold choices.
What was your toughest scene? What was the scene that you kept sweating at?
Oh, killing everybody.
Really?
Yeah, no, serving the drinks. What was tough for a lot of it is I didn't have many words. And you can do a lot with words. You can do a lot without words too. But it's hard. Tim makes a couple of speeches. Makes a speech when he hands out the pina colada. He makes a speech on the boat when their phones are about to start pinging. And they're not great speeches. Some part of me wanted a great speech. Of course, they're not great speeches because he's out of his head. He can't say the right thing. He doesn't know how to say it. He's got a ton of drugs in him. He's terrified and he breaks off halfway through a sentence. It just, nothing comes out quite right. On the boat as well. There is no great thing to tie it all up in knots. It's not a Lifetime movie. So it was trying to find the truth without being articulate. Yeah, that was what scared me. I knew it was always coming as well. Most of it we shot out of sequence. The first day and the last day was, on the boat. But that actually did come near the end. And I knew it was coming. And I thought, if I blow that, I've blown everything. If I blow the whole season for everybody.
You definitely did not blow the whole season.
Well, that's very kind. Thanks very much.
You gave a great performance. And there's just a lot of different levels to it. And they come with this perfect organic infusion of the acting and the script together, serving this crazy character journey that ends up like a perfect Buddhist journey.
That is the most brilliant thing about Mike's writing. First of all, it seems like it's just a whole bunch of people doing a whole bunch of things and it's fun. And then when you watch it twice, like I've seen more than twice now, you realize there's not a wasted syllable anywhere in it. It's all part of it. There's a reason people do PhDs on it. Not that he over-intellectualizes it at all. He might not even be conscious of how all the fabrics are interwoven and leading to this beautiful thing. So, it wasn't a blend of acting and writing. There is this great writing. It's like surfing. I don't know what the analogy is, but you just get on it and you write it as best and honestly and truthfully as you can because it'll take you there. Often writing won't. just not good enough. But he'll take you there. There's nothing wasted, nothing, anything that at first seemed incongruous or wrong. You give it a bit of time, think about it a bit, or don't think about it and just feel it. And you go, oh no, it was actually perfect. And he gets called a genius a lot. And I've used that word a lot. And in some ways that takes away from the work. It doesn't sit there and it's just automatic writing from heaven. Like, he makes that thing. If he's the Michelangelo of TV scriptwriting, whatever it is, it's crafted and it's sculpted. It doesn't arrive. And every part of it, him imagining it, him picturing where to set the thing, and then coming up with the characters, then writing it, but then directing it, and then editing it. There are great editors, there are great collaborators, but in the end, it's Mike's unpredictability as a human being. And if you sit down and have a chat with Mike, anytime you think, I know what his answer will be to this, I know who to be in his company, forget it. Mike is just, he's a one-off.
We talked a second ago about your toughest scene. What was your favorite day on set? What was your favorite thing to do as Tim?
Well, my favorite days were the days off.
Well, of course.
This is likely to make people actually throw up in their mouth slightly. But my favorite days were when I saw my kids kill it, my screen kids. I got to know them really well. I knew which scenes they were nervous about. Talked to them about it a lot, which scenes they worried about, which scenes they waited forever for. So Sarah Catherine waited 8 episodes, as little goody two-shoes to finally break down and go, I'm actually a princess and I need Egyptian linen and organic food, and cried her eyes out at the breakfast table and did it so brilliantly and beautifully in a difficult atmosphere to do it. And I was just really proud of her and thrilled for her. And the same when Patrick came to me in episode 7 and kind of blew his whole character, Saxon, out of the water, kind of exposed himself to be this terrible loser who could only live in the shadow of his father. And also Sam, who didn't get the big showy scenes, but did everything so subtly and with such nuance and beautifully. Anyway, I loved watching them. I never feel like, I did well today or something ever. There's times when you get some kind of catharsis, emotional catharsis, and you feel like you've been through a lot, but then it's because you felt like your kid had died or something. Tim's pretty miserable. So I was pretty miserable. I mean, Jason wasn't, but as Tim, I was having a really bad time all the time. But I loved watching them do great, and particularly when it was something they'd been anxious about. Those were the great days on set.
I mean, there's no weak link, and everybody gave great performances. So, kudos to you on that for being part of a perfect ensemble.
Oh, thank you. Also loved the days when we were all together, because, we didn't all get to know each other that well. You film with your group and other people are filming, and so you didn't always get to hang out as much as you would like with other people, and friendships formed within the kind of your own little filming clique. There was one hotel, because we stayed in numerous, always together, but different hotels, that had a beach front where we would always wrap before the sunset, and when it would all get out to the beach, it would all get in the water and splash, and that was lovely for a week or two. But I loved it when we were all together and I could watch, the girls. I could watch Carrie, Michelle and Leslie do their thing, and because we were waiting, because there were a few weeks, maybe a few months spread out of night shoots. I mean, you go at 6 o'clock at night and you'd shoot till 6 o'clock in the morning. They shoot the old guy last. Because the women should be shot earlier and look good. It's not meant to look like 6 o'clock in the morning, but it doesn't matter if I look like shit, because Tim was feeling like shit and I'm old anyways. So I got to sit there all night and watch other people do their stuff. It's always watching other people. Watching Christian, who I think is a genius, played Fabian, have such a good time and milk all these different layers of comedy out of Fabian that I didn't see on the page.
It was a great ensemble. Well, so what's next? What are you excited about that's coming up?
I'm about to start shooting, and I'm coming to LA for the White Lotus publicity juggernaut rolls on and on and on, and it's great because people haven't seen it yet, watching it on streaming, and people loved it all over the world, which is so nice to be part of something that people enjoyed. They didn't just enjoy watching it, they enjoyed watching it with their friends. People said to me all the time, God, you made me so tense. And I go, is that bad? They go, no, it's great, thanks very much. But to be something that gave people so much pleasure because they could do viewing parties and talk about it, but the next thing I'm filming coming up, I have a couple of films out at the moment, one in America and one in England, doing lots of publicity for, because they're indies, they're not White Lotus, they could do some help. And then I'm about to start shooting Victorian Psycho, which is a fab film. It does exactly what you think it should do, because it does what it says on the tin. It's about a Victorian psycho, and it will be fun. And it is not as real or as painful as playing Tim.
That sounds amazing. I can't wait to see that. But look, man, you've been so generous with your time. We're going to have to go on Zoom, and I'll show you a couple magic tricks over Zoom where you use the decks in your own hands.
That's how keen I am on magic.
You've got that many. All right. I've got my deck from the Shakespeare gift shop at the Folger Shakespeare Library.
So let me give a plug to someone. I was in LA a couple of weeks ago, and I drove 2 hours through the pouring rain to Irvine to watch a man called Jason Ladany.
I know exactly who he is. He's incredible.
He's incredible. And I'm so glad I drove there and drove back to see him, and I got to watch him do his stuff. And if you're interested in cards at all, watch him. He's the best there is as a card mechanic. I know how he's
Very
doing
funny
it.
online,
My eyes
too.
are 3 inches away from his head, and I cannot see him doing it.
He's hilarious online on
Yeah,
Instagram,
he's very funny. He's a great
YouTube.
performer, but he's also just brilliant at the things that he does. So I'm upset. But also, I see a parallel between magic and storytelling all the time. I always have. The misdirection and the prestige and the leading people to a surprise ending that nonetheless is satisfying, and red herrings along the way and stuff. I've always felt that there's a strong parallel between the two.
Come on, the birth of cinema, Méliès,
Right.
doing magic in silent movies in the 1890s. I mean, like, it's hand in hand. So you're absolutely right about that. But look, man, it was great catching up for this amazing episode, and I can't wait to see what you do next. Thanks so much for hanging out today, man.
It was lovely to talk to you.
And that's how the Q&A went down. Special thanks again to actor Jason Isaacs for being so generous with his time and chatting about his performance in White Lotus Season 3, which is Emmy eligible. And while you're surfing around online, I hope you check out Backstory Magazine. We just published a new issue. It's our summer issue. It's our Emmy Contenders issue. It's issue 56. And you know, this is our 13th year of publishing. It's my 20th year of podcasting, and I certainly could not have done it without your support. So thanks for your support. If you've never read us before and you want to test drive us, you could read our free issue at backstory.net on a desktop or laptop or via our iPad app, Backstory. And if you like what you see, and I'm sure that you will, you could use discount coupon code SAVE5 to save $5 off a 1-year subscription. So look, it would really mean a lot to me to have my podcast listeners and Apple Podcasts and Spotify and my YouTube watchers of the Backstory Magazine YouTube page, which is where you could see all these Zoomcasts. That's right, you could see us hanging out and talking. It would really mean a lot to me to have you show your support for independent entertainment journalism. So thanks for considering becoming a subscriber. The Q&A with Jeff Goldsmith podcast is a copyright of Unlikely Films Incorporated in 2025. All rights reserved. And folks, if you want to drop me a line, I'm really easy to find. You could find me as Yo Goldsmith on Blue Sky, or Backstory_mag on Blue Sky, or Yo Goldsmith on Twitter, or Backstory_mag on Twitter, or Yo Goldsmith on Instagram, or Backstory_mag on Instagram. Do you see a trend here? I also have a Facebook fan page, which is an easy way to connect. And of course, you could go old school and drop me a line anytime, backstoryletters@gmail.com, and I will do my darndest to respond. I'm Jeff Goldsmith, the publisher of Backstory Magazine and the host of the Q&A, thanking you for tuning in and telling you to stay out of trouble. Till next week.